Cross Ice Pass. Cross Ice Pass. A Second Chance Ice Romance. Cordelia Blackmore. Copyright 2026 Cordelia Blackmore. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except for brief quotations in a book review. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. First edition, 2026. For everyone who ever fell and got back up. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Alan Watts. Contents. Prologue. 1 year ago. Chapter 1. Line change. Chapter 2. Rules of the game. Chapter 3. Thin ice. Chapter 4. Power play. Chapter 5. Breakaway. Chapter 6. Cross-check. Chapter 7. Penalty box. Chapter 8. 5-minute major. Chapter 9. Reading the play. Chapter 10. Ice time. Chapter 11. Behind the mask. Chapter 12. Center ice. Chapter 13. Offsides. Chapter 14. Chapter 15. Blind side. Chapter 16. Chapter 17. Chapter 18. Chapter 19. Chapter 23. Final buzzer. Chapter 21. Chapter 22. Chapter 24. Epilogue. 1 year later. Prologue. 1 year ago. POV, Remy. The thing about ice at 11 at night is that it doesn't care about you. It doesn't care that practice ended 3 hours ago. It doesn't care that your shoulder is burning from a hit you took in Tuesday's scrimmage or that you haven't eaten since noon or that the only reason you're still here, alone in a dark arena that closed 2 hours ago, is because the moment you stop moving, your head gets loud. The ice just sits there. Cold. Flat. Honest. I liked it for that. I'd been out here for almost 2 hours, running the same drill over and over, edge work, crossovers, tight figure eights that I didn't need to practice anymore but ran anyway because my body knew what to do without me having to think about it. That was the whole point. Don't think. Just move. Just the sound of blades cutting clean lines into the surface and the low hum of the refrigeration unit under the floor and nothing else. The arena lights above the ice were off. Only the emergency strips along the boards were on, dull orange lines that gave just enough light to skate by. I knew this rink by feel anyway. I could have done it blind. I was mid-stride on a back crossover when the lights in the bleachers came on. Not all of them. Just one row. Row C, Section 2, straight ahead of me. I stopped hard, spray of ice off my blade, heart slamming up into my throat before my brain even caught up. My first thought was security. My second thought was Coach Harlow, and I actually went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Then I saw her. She was sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, a thick green thermos balanced on the seat beside her, a textbook open across her lap that she clearly was not reading. She was watching me. Not like she'd just looked up, like she'd been watching for a while and hadn't bothered to hide it. I didn't know her name yet. I knew her face. You couldn't be on this team and not know Coach Harlow's daughter by sight. She came to some games. Sat apart from the other families. Kept to herself in a way that wasn't shy, more like she'd decided a long time ago that blending into the background was just easier. We stared at each other across the ice for a long second. The arena closes at 9, I said. I know. Her voice carried easy in the empty space, no echo, just clean and direct. The east side door doesn't latch right. You have to pull it hard or it stays open. I looked at her. You come here at night a lot. Sometimes. She tilted her head slightly. You. No, I lied. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. More like she'd filed something away. I should have gotten off the ice. Should have grabbed my bag from the bench, changed out of my skates, gone back to the dorm, eaten something, slept. I had a 7 a.m. weight session. I had a paper due Thursday that I hadn't started. I had about 40 good reasons to leave. I skated to the boards in front of her section instead. Up close she looked less like the background character I'd always half noticed at games. She had dark circles under her eyes and a pen stuck behind her ear, and she was wearing a Harlow University hoodie that was 2 sizes too big, the sleeves pulled over her hands. The thermos, I could see now, had a small sticker on the side, a cartoon wolf with a hockey stick. It looked like something from the campus bookstore. She held it out over the boards. "You want some? It's black. No sugar. I don't drink coffee this late. You're still skating at 11. I took the thermos. It was hot and strong, and I handed it back after 2 sips, and she wrapped both hands around it and looked back out at the ice like it was a landscape she found interesting. I leaned against the boards in my skates, arms folded on the top rail, and for a minute neither of us said anything. It wasn't uncomfortable. That was the strange part. It should have been weird, some girl I barely knew, her father was my coach, dark empty arena, late on a Wednesday. It should have been weird. It wasn't. "Sports psych thesis," she said, without me asking. "That's what I'm doing here. There's research on late-night solitary practice. What it does to performance. Whether it helps or whether athletes just tell themselves it helps." She paused. "I wasn't going to say anything to you. I was just going to observe. But you stopped." She looked at me then, straight on. So, I said. Her name was Tessa. I already knew that. She knew I knew it. Coach Harlow had pointed me out to her once, first week of the semester, the way he did with all the scholarship players, some kind of "this is who I am responsible for" ritual. She'd nodded at me from across the hallway and gone back to whatever she was reading. That was 3 months ago. We talked for 2 hours. I don't know how it happened. 1 minute we were doing the careful thing, small talk, weather, classes, the kind of nothing conversation you have with someone you don't plan on seeing again. Then she said something about the pressure mapping study she was running, and I asked a real question about it, and she looked at me like she hadn't expected that, and something shifted, and after that it was different. She talked about her thesis like it mattered to her, like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. She had a theory that the performance data coaches used to measure athletes didn't account for internal state, that you could be skating perfect lines and be completely falling apart inside and the numbers wouldn't catch it. That the gap between what an athlete showed on the ice and what they were actually carrying was where most of the real damage happened. I didn't say anything for a second after she said that. She caught my face. "Too much." "No," I said. "I was just thinking you're probably right." She looked down at the thermos. "My dad would say the numbers don't lie." "Your dad's never been wrong about a number in his life," I said. "That doesn't mean numbers tell the whole story." She was quiet. Then, "No. It doesn't." Something about the way she said it made me think we weren't talking about hockey anymore. I don't remember what else we talked about. I remember the way she laughed at something I said around midnight, surprised, like she hadn't expected to, covering it with one sleeve-covered hand. I remember the overhead lights shutting off on a timer somewhere above us, leaving just the orange board lights, the 2 of us in near dark, and neither of us moving to leave. I remember thinking she was the easiest person to talk to that I'd ever met, and that I had no idea what to do with that. At 1 a.m. I said I'd drive her home. She didn't argue. She packed up her textbook, still unopened, and her thermos and climbed down the bleacher steps. I changed out of my skates in the equipment room and pulled my bag over my shoulder, and we walked out the east door together. It didn't latch right. You had to pull it hard. She knew her way around this building better than I did. My truck was the only car in the lot. It was cold, that sharp upstate New York cold that has teeth in it, and she didn't complain about it once. She gave me the address. I drove. The streets were empty at that hour, just streetlights and bare November trees and the particular quiet of a campus town late on a weeknight. I pulled up to her building. She had her own place, I hadn't known that. I'd assumed she lived with her father. She gathered her stuff and had the door half open when she stopped. "Don't tell my dad you were still in the rink," she said. I looked at her. Don't tell him you were either. She smiled then. A real one, not the almost one from before. It lasted about 3 seconds and then she was out of the truck and walking to her door, and I sat there and watched her go and told myself not to read anything into it. I drove back to the dorm. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the gap between what an athlete shows on the ice and what they're actually carrying. I thought about it for a long time. That was a year ago. That was the beginning. One conversation, one cup of coffee, one door that didn't latch right, and neither of us went the other way. I should have skated in the other direction. I knew it even then. I just didn't care. Chapter 1. Line change. POV, Tessa. My clipboard had 16 names on it. I knew all of them. I knew their numbers, their positions, their average shift times, their face-off percentages, their injury histories. I knew which ones slept 8 hours and which ones didn't sleep at all and how that showed up in their first period numbers versus their third. I knew all of this because it was my thesis. Because I was here professionally, with permission, with a faculty advisor and a research protocol and a color-coded spreadsheet on my laptop back in my apartment. I was not here because number 11 was on the ice. I told myself that every morning when I laced up my boots and walked across the cold parking lot to the arena. I told myself that when I pushed through the heavy side door and found my spot in the lower bleachers, clipboard ready, pen uncapped. I told myself that while I was watching the team run warm-up laps and noting response times and checking my watch. I was very good at telling myself things. The Harlow University Wolves were third in the conference. Everyone on campus knew that. It was on the athletics banner outside the gym, on the student newspaper front page, in my father's voice every time he picked up the phone, that low-current excitement he tried to keep professional and never quite managed. They were third and they were climbing and the second half of the season was starting to feel like something real, like a run that could actually go somewhere. My father was the reason for that. And Remy Callahan was the reason for my father. I wrote shift transition, 14 seconds on my clipboard and did not look at the ice. Practice had been running for 40 minutes. The team was doing line rushes now, 3-on-2 breakouts, full speed, Coach Harlow standing at the red line with his arms crossed and his whistle around his neck, calling corrections in that flat, carry across the rink voice that I'd been hearing my whole life. The assistant coaches moved along the boards. The players cycled through in groups. I had a system. I watched each player for 30 seconds, noted what I needed, moved to the next name on my list. 30 seconds each. Systematic. Clean. The fact that number 11 was on the list the same as everyone else was just how a list worked. Callahan, R, center, line 1. 30 seconds. I watched him take the puck off the half wall, drive the middle, dish it back without looking and still hit his man clean. 30 seconds was enough to note high hockey IQ, anticipates play 2 moves ahead, minimal wasted movement. 30 seconds was enough to do my job. I moved to the next name. He's something, right? I didn't jump. I was proud of that. Marcus Webb dropped onto the bleacher bench 1 row behind me, close enough that I could smell the cold coming off his gear. He had his helmet off, visor pushed up, one skate propped on the seat beside him. He wasn't supposed to be in the bleachers during practice. No one was supposed to be talking to me during practice. My father had made that clear when he'd agreed to let me observe. You're a researcher. They're athletes. Keep it professional or lose the access. I had kept it very professional for 6 weeks. I'm working, I said. I know. Marcus's eyes were still on the ice. I'm on a line change. 2 minutes. He nodded toward center ice. Callahan. You watching his transition speed? Because coach has been on him about it all week. Says he's half a second slow off the draw. I looked at my clipboard. I'm watching the whole team. Sure. He said it easy, without weight, the way he said most things. Marcus Webb had a face built for being charming, good jaw, easy smile, the kind of confidence that looked natural until you watched it long enough to see how carefully it was maintained. He'd been on the team since freshman year. He was a good player. He knew he was a good player. He also knew he wasn't the best player on this team, and I'd always suspected that bothered him more than he let on. Must be strange, he said. Watching your dad run practice. Being in here but not in here. You know. I grew up going to games, I said. I'm used to it. That's not what I mean. I looked up from my clipboard then. He was watching me with a small, neutral expression that could have meant anything. His eyes moved from my face down to the ice and back, just briefly, just once. My stomach went flat. Your 2 minutes are up, I said. He stood, stretched, pulled his helmet back on. Nice to talk to you, Tessa. He skated back toward the gate like nothing happened. I put my pen to my clipboard and held it there and did not write anything for 10 seconds. On the ice, my father blew his whistle. Line change. The first unit came off and the second unit went on. I made myself look down at my notes, find my place, get back to work. Systematic. Clean. This was research. These were subjects. I had a protocol. The gate to my left opened and closed as the line change moved through. I felt him before I heard him, that awareness I'd spent a year learning to suppress, the one that lit up somewhere under my sternum whenever he was close. I kept my eyes down. I kept my pen moving. I was writing something, I don't even know what, some string of meaningless notation, just to have something to look at that wasn't him. He didn't slow down. He didn't look at me. He moved past the boards in full stride, reaching for his water bottle with one glove, the way he always did on a change, easy and automatic. And without turning his head, quiet enough that it was just for me, just 3 words dropped into the cold air between us. Nice jacket. He was gone before I finished processing it. I looked down. His jacket. The gray one with the small Wolves logo on the chest, the one that had been on my couch when I left this morning and that I had grabbed in a hurry because mine was still damp from the snow last night, the one that was very clearly a men's large and sat off my shoulders and... His jacket. I was wearing his jacket to his practice in front of his teammates and his coach who was my father. My face did not move. I had spent a year getting very good at that, keeping my face still in this building, in his presence, in the specific situation of being in love with someone I had approximately 17 reasons not to be in love with. I had gotten so good at it that sometimes I scared myself. I pressed my pen to my clipboard. Shift transition, I wrote. Eye contact, none. Behavioral control, intact. Down on the ice, my father's whistle cut sharp across the arena. Callahan. Again. Push through the zone, don't float. You're better than that. Remy nodded once without breaking stride and looped back to the start position. I watched him set up for the next rep, watched him wait for the whistle with his stick on the ice and his weight forward and that particular stillness he had before he moved, like something coiled, like the half-second before a crack of thunder, and I wrote nothing at all for a while. Across the ice, Marcus Webb came off the far gate and glanced up at the bleachers on his way to the bench. He didn't raise an eyebrow. He didn't smile. He just looked at me for 1 second, then looked away, and that was somehow worse than anything else he could have done. I turned to a fresh page on my clipboard. Subject responses under observed pressure, I wrote at the top. Then I underlined it. Twice. Because one of us needed to stay focused, and right now, in this arena, in this jacket, it was going to have to be me. Chapter 2. Rules of the game. POV, Remy. There were 5 rules. I came up with 3 of them. Tessa came up with 2. We wrote them on a piece of paper on her kitchen table about 2 weeks after things became something real and undeniable, because she said it would help to see them written down. I thought that was a very Tessa thing to do, take something complicated and put it on paper like naming it would make it manageable. Looking back, she was right. At the time it helped. Now, 10 months later, the paper was in the kitchen drawer under some takeout menus and a dead battery, and the rules lived in my head instead. Rule 1, no contact in the arena. Not eye contact, not conversation beyond what you'd have with any other player and any other researcher. Nothing that could be read. Rule 2, no public anything. No restaurants in town, no campus stuff, no parties where someone might see us and put it together. Rule 3, her car stays in her parking spot when I come over, we take mine, and I park on the street 1 block down. Rule 4, no telling anyone. Not Cole, not Juno, not anyone. Rule 5, when the season ends, we figure out the rest. The season hadn't ended yet. I parked 1 block down from her building and walked through the cold with my hands in my pockets. It was just past 8. Practice had been done for 4 hours, I'd eaten at the dining hall, done film review, answered 6 texts from Cole about the upcoming game, and spent the rest of the time watching the minutes move until it was late enough to come here without it looking like anything. This was also part of the rules. The part we hadn't written down. Her building had a key code on the door. I knew it. I took the stairs to the 2nd floor, knocked twice, waited. She opened the door still holding a highlighter, her hair pulled back, reading glasses on that she'd deny owning if you asked her about them in any other setting. She looked at me. Then she looked down at her own jacket, her real one, the burgundy one, and back up. "Don't," she said. I didn't say anything. "You were going to." I really wasn't. She stepped back to let me in. Her apartment was the way it always was, small and warm and full of books that weren't shelved so much as stacked in systems that made sense only to her. Her thesis notes covered the kitchen table. There was a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the counter from what looked like dinner. I moved it to the sink without saying anything and she pretended not to notice. This was also something we did. These small, quiet things. The bowl in the sink. The way she always moved my shoes out of the doorway when I left them there. The coffee she made without asking because she'd learned exactly how I drank it. A whole language built out of small habits that no one else would ever see. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat. She went back to the couch and her highlighter and her notes, tucking her feet under her, and for a while neither of us said anything. It was comfortable. That was the word. In every other part of my life I was performing something, the captain thing, the good student thing, the scholarship kid who doesn't take anything for granted thing, but in this apartment I was just me, and she was just her, and the air between us didn't ask for anything. "How was film review?" she said, not looking up. "Long coach wants us pressing higher in the zone against Eastbrook. Their defensemen cheat low. He's been saying that since November. Now he has the data to back it up." She made a small sound that might have been agreement. Her highlighter moved across a page. I watched her read and thought about how strange it was to know someone this well, to know the specific way she chewed the end of her pen when she was thinking hard, to know she'd had cereal for dinner because she forgot to eat when she was deep in work, to know that the reading glasses were real and the thing about denying them was just a habit she'd never bothered to drop. I got up and went to the couch and she lifted her feet automatically to let me sit and dropped them across my lap without looking up from her notes. I put my hand on her ankle. She kept reading. This was the thing no one outside this apartment ever got to see. This exact thing. Her ankle under my hand and her reading glasses and the stack of sports psych journals on the coffee table and the way we fit around each other in this space like we'd been doing it for years. I thought about that sometimes, what it would be like to not have to hide it. To be in a restaurant and reach across a table and hold her hand because I wanted to. To sit in the bleachers at a game instead of pretending I didn't know where she was sitting. To have Cole ask me how things were going and actually answer the question. "Hey," I said. Are you okay?" She highlighted something. "I'm fine. You've been quiet since I got here." "I'm working." "You're always working." "This is different quiet." She stopped highlighting. Didn't look up right away, just held the pen still over the page for a second. Then she closed the journal and took her glasses off and looked at me. "I'm just tired," she said. It was true. I could see it, the specific kind of tired that wasn't about sleep. The kind that came from carrying something. I'd been watching her carry something for the past week and I hadn't pushed because she'd tell me when she was ready and I'd learned to wait. But there was something else underneath it tonight. Something she was keeping very far back behind her eyes. "You know you can tell me," I said. "I know. Whenever you're ready." "I know, Remy." She said it gently, not like a brush-off. She reached over and put her hand over mine on her ankle and squeezed once, and I let it go. We stayed like that for a while. She went back to her notes but the highlighter stopped moving. I turned the TV on low, some game I wasn't watching, and after a while she shifted sideways on the couch and put her head on my shoulder, notes forgotten, and I put my arm around her and we just sat. These were the parts one wanted to keep. Not the sneaking, not the rules, not the careful performance of not knowing each other in the arena. Just this. The specific weight of her head on my shoulder and the sound of the heating unit and the snow against the window. I wanted to tell her that. I kept almost saying it and then not saying it because it felt too close to the conversation we'd had 40 times, the one that always ended the same way: when do we tell him? Not yet, and I was tired of that conversation. I was tired of not yet. But I also knew what was on the other side of not yet, and I wasn't ready to blow up my entire life. That was the truth I didn't like looking at. Coach Harlow was the closest thing to a father I'd ever had. My actual father was in Minnesota doing whatever he'd been doing for the past 10 years, and my mother was doing her best, but her best had always been stretched thin, and when Coach Harlow had looked at me across a recruiting visit table and said, "I want you on my team, son," I'd felt something slot into place that I hadn't known was missing. I was not ready to lose that. And I was not ready to look him in the face and watch his opinion of me change. So. Not yet. We should probably talk about, I started. Not tonight, Tessa said. Very quiet. Can we just, not tonight? Yeah, I said. Okay. She settled closer. I turned the TV volume down a little more. She was asleep inside 20 minutes. I knew from her breathing. I should have woken her up and gone home, but I didn't. I sat in the dark and watched some game I didn't care about and listened to the snow and thought about the jacket she'd been wearing at practice and Marcus Webb's eyebrow and the 6 weeks I'd been watching him watch her and telling myself it was nothing. My phone was on the cushion beside me. I picked it up to check the time. The notification was already there. Unknown number. No contact name. The preview showed in the lock screen, just a few words, and I read them twice before I unlocked the phone and read them again. You two are cute. I went very still. On the couch, Tessa breathed slow and even. Asleep. Safe in her apartment with her notes and her glasses and her one block of distance between us and everything outside this room. I read the message a third time. Then I sat there for a long time and didn't move. Chapter 3. Thin Ice. POV, Tessa. I woke up alone, which meant he'd done the responsible thing and gone home at some point in the night. I hated when he did the responsible thing. My phone was on the nightstand. 7:14 a.m. 2 texts from Remy, one sent at 2 a.m. that just said "call me when you wake up," and one sent at 6:47 that said "before practice." Important. I was already sitting up and dialing before I finished reading the second one. He picked up on the first ring. "Did you sleep?" I said. "Some." He didn't sound like some. He sounded like a person who'd been awake since 2 in the morning turning something over and over in his head. The text. I need to figure out where it came from. Blocked number. Yeah. I tried calling back. Nothing. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen and stood in front of the open fridge without seeing any of it. The text. You two are cute. For words that had been sitting in my stomach like a stone since he'd shown me the screen at midnight, both of us staring at it in the dark like maybe if we looked long enough it would explain itself. Walk me through, who knows, I said. That's the problem. It's a short list. It was. I'd told Juno in October, 3 months ago, after she'd found one of his hoodies on my bathroom hook and given me a look I couldn't talk my way out of. I'd made her swear. Juno Park had a lot of qualities, but loose lips wasn't one of them. She'd kept bigger secrets than this and never once slipped. Cole. I said. Remy was quiet for a beat. I told him last week. Remy. I know. I know, it was, he asked me directly. He said he'd been watching me for weeks and he wanted to know what was going on with me because I seemed off and he was worried. I couldn't lie to his face. I pressed my fingers to the bridge of my nose. Cole Drayton was Remy's alternate captain and the most straightforward person I'd ever met. He was the kind of person who cried at award ceremonies and apologized immediately when he was wrong and had never in his life done anything calculated. He also couldn't lie to save himself. Which meant if someone asked him the right question at the wrong moment, he wouldn't say anything, Remy said. I know him. I believe you. But him knowing is still a variable we didn't have last week. Yeah. A pause. What about Juno? Any chance she said something to someone? Not on purpose, just. No, I was certain about that. She's been watching me stress about this for 3 months and she's never said a word. It's not Juno. We went quiet. I could hear him in the background, the dorm hallway, other guys moving around, the muffled sounds of early morning. He'd be at practice in an hour. I had an 8 a.m. lecture. So someone else knows, I said. Or someone saw something and put it together. When? Where? I don't know yet. His voice was careful in the way it got when he was working through something he didn't want to say out loud yet. I'm going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. Tessa. Don't, I said. Don't do the thing where you go off and handle it and report back. We're in this the same amount. A beat. Okay, he said. Yeah. We figure it out. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a while longer. The fridge was still open. I closed it and got dressed in yesterday's clothes and pulled on my own jacket, my actual jacket, the burgundy one, and packed my bag for class. The walk to the lot took 4 minutes. It was cold, the sky the flat white color it got before more snow, and the parking lot was mostly empty this early. I had my keys out and my head down against the wind and I was almost to my car when something made me look up. I don't know what it was. Some instinct. Marcus Webb was standing at the far edge of the lot beside his car, talking on his phone. He had his back mostly to me. He hadn't seen me, or he was doing a very good job of looking like he hadn't. I got in my car and drove. I told myself there was nothing strange about a person standing in a parking lot. People stood in parking lots all the time. There was a whole team worth of players who lived in the athletic dorms on this side of campus. He had every reason to be there. I told myself that all the way to class. I didn't believe it. My father called at noon. I was between lectures, sitting on a bench outside the psych building eating a granola bar and checking my notes for my afternoon seminar. His name on my screen was both completely normal and, given the past 12 hours, enough to make my whole body go stiff. Hey, Dad. Hey. You have a minute? Sure. I brushed granola crumbs off my jacket. What's up? I wanted to see if you're free for dinner this week. Thursday maybe. There's that Italian place you like on 5th. This was normal. We did this once every 2 or 3 weeks, dinner, just the two of us, splitting the bread and talking about whatever felt safe to talk about, which was usually hockey and my thesis and occasionally, briefly, the state of each other's lives. It was the routine we'd built out of 12 years of him being better at coaching a team than being a parent. I'd stopped resenting it somewhere around junior year of high school. Now it just was what it was. Thursday works, I said. Good. I heard him shift the desk chair in his office, the one that had been squeaking for 3 years. How's the thesis observation going? You getting what you need from practice? Yeah, it's good. The data's coming in clean. The guys aren't giving you a hard time. No. They mostly ignore me. Good. That's how it should be. You're there to work, not, he stopped himself, smoothed it over. It's just better if you stay in the researcher role. Less complicated. I know, Dad. I'm not criticizing. I just think about the team dynamic a lot this time of year. We're in a good place but we're not locked in yet, and anything that throws off the chemistry, he paused. Are you picking up on anything? In your observations? Any players who seem distracted or off? My hand tightened on the phone. Nothing specific, I said. My voice came out clean and level and I was glad he couldn't see my face. There's normal season pressure. Everyone's managing it. Callahan. The name landed like a skate blade on cracked ice. What about him? I said. He's been sharp but I feel like there's something under the surface. Like he's carrying weight. You notice that? He seems focused to me. My father made that sound he made when he was deciding whether to trust an assessment. He's a hard one to read. Always has been. A pause. He's a good kid, Tessa. Whatever else, he's a good kid. I know, I said. We talked for another 3 minutes about nothing. When we hung up I sat on the bench for a long time with the dead phone in my hand and the cold coming through my jacket and watched students move across the path in front of me without seeing any of them. He doesn't know, I told myself. He would not be inviting you to dinner at the Italian place if he knew. My hands were cold. I put them in my pockets and went to class. That afternoon I texted Remy, "Can't tonight. Need to think. I'll call tomorrow." He texted back after 20 minutes, "You okay?" "Yes. Just need space." A longer pause this time. "Okay. I'm here if you need me." I put my phone face down on my desk and opened my thesis notes and stared at them. The internship email had been sitting in my inbox for 4 days. I'd read it maybe 30 times. The subject line was Graduate Research Placement Offer, Boston University Sports Science Lab, and the body of the email was 3 paragraphs of professional language that added up to, "We want you, it's paid, it starts January 15th, it will go on your record in a way that other opportunities won't, please respond by end of month." January 15th was in 6 weeks. The Wolves' championship run, if it happened, and the way the season was going it might actually happen, would go to February at the earliest. I hadn't told anyone about the email. Not Juno. Not my father. Not Remy. I'd been sitting with it alone, like if I held it long enough I'd figure out what it meant without having to say it out loud to another person. Boston was 4 hours away. I knew the exact number because I'd typed it into Maps at midnight 3 days ago and sat there looking at the blue route line like it would tell me something useful. I closed my thesis notes without adding anything to them. Outside my window the snow had started again, slow and straight, no wind. The parking lot below was quiet. I watched the flakes hit the pavement and melt for a while, not thinking about anything in particular, just letting my brain sit still for a minute before it started up again. I should eat something. I should call Juno. I should answer the internship email one way or the other and stop letting it take up space in my head while everything else was also taking up space in my head. I should tell Remy about it. I turned off my desk lamp and lay down on top of my covers in the dark instead. At some point I fell asleep without meaning to. When I woke up it was past midnight, the room dark and cold because I'd left the window cracked, and I lay still for a moment listening to the quiet before I got up to close it. The parking lot below was empty. Just snow and the orange cone of the streetlight and the row of parked cars along the curb. Except one of them had its engine running. I noticed it because of the exhaust, thin white smoke drifting up in the cold, visible under the streetlight. A dark car, sitting at the curb maybe 50 feet from the building entrance. Just idling. No one getting out. No one getting in. I stood at the window and looked at it for a long time. It took me a minute to place it. It was the same make, same color, same small dent on the rear panel that I'd watched him lean against in the parking lot this morning. Marcus Webb's car. I stood there with my hand on the cold glass and my heart doing something loud and irregular in my chest. He would have no reason to be here. This was a residential street. The athletic dorms were on the other side of campus. He had no reason to be on this street at midnight, outside this specific building, sitting in his car with the engine running like he was waiting for something. No reason at all. I stepped back from the window. The gap in the curtain fell closed. I picked up my phone and I almost called Remy. My thumb was on his name. I stayed there for a full 30 seconds of standing in the dark in my own apartment being afraid in a way that made me furious at myself for being afraid. Then I put the phone down. Not because I didn't want to call him. Because the moment I called him he would be over here in 15 minutes, parking 1 block down, coming through my door, and then he would be managing it. Handling it. Deciding how much I needed to know. I needed to know everything. I needed to figure this out the same way he was figuring it out. That was what I'd told him this morning. I went back to the window. The car was gone. Just empty street. Just snow. I stood there until the cold from the glass got to be too much, and then I went back to bed and lay in the dark and told myself to sleep. My brain had other plans. Chapter 4. Power Play. POV, Remy. The thing about a good game is that for 2 hours nothing else exists. Not the text from the blocked number. Not the feeling of someone watching. Not the conversation I needed to have and kept not having. For 2 hours it was just the ice and the puck and the play in front of me, and I understood exactly what to do and I did it, and that was enough. We beat Kendall College 4-2. I scored twice, once in the first on a wrist shot from the left circle that the goalie got a piece of but not enough, and once in the third on a breakaway that I probably should have passed on and didn't, just put my head down and went, and the crowd came up loud in that way they did when something happened fast and clean and nobody saw it coming. The locker room afterward had that specific energy, that loud, loose, we just won energy that made everyone a little more themselves. Music up. Guys peeling off gear and talking over each other, and someone had their phone out playing something with too much bass. Cole was in the middle of it, laughing at something I missed, and even the third and fourth line guys who barely got ice time were grinning because a win was a win and you felt it in the room no matter where you'd been on the bench. Marcus dropped onto the bench beside me and slapped my shoulder pads hard. Captain's got the touch tonight. He was grinning, wide and real looking. 2 goals. Scouts are going to be drooling. Scouts aren't here yet. 3 weeks. He said it like a countdown he'd been running. You nervous? No. Good. You shouldn't be. He leaned back, arms spread, lord of the room posture. Honestly, you could fall on your face for the next 3 weeks and they'd still take you. The way you moved in the third, that breakaway, that's not coachable, man. You either have it or you don't. You had a good game too, I said. Because he had. 2 assists, solid defensive work, nothing flashy but nothing wrong. Marcus was exactly the kind of player you wanted on your second line, reliable, smart, hard to rattle. Nah, he waved it off, but something moved behind his eyes that he shut down fast. Tonight was yours. He got up before I could say anything else and moved across the room to where 2 of the defensemen were arguing about something. I watched him go and felt the familiar low-level thing I'd been feeling around him for weeks, not quite suspicion, not quite certainty. Something in between. The room started clearing out. Guys heading to showers, heading out, making plans for the rest of the night. I took my time with my gear, letting the noise die down. I always did after games, needed a few minutes of quiet after 2 hours of controlled chaos, just to let my head settle back into normal. When I finally had my gear bagged and my jacket on, the room was mostly empty. Just a couple of the younger guys still at their stalls and the equipment manager gathering tape scraps off the floor. Then Coach Harlow appeared in the doorway. Callahan. Walk with me a minute. It wasn't unusual. He did this sometimes, kept a player back for a quick one-on-one, talked through something from the game. I'd had these conversations 100 times. They usually felt like the best part of the night. Tonight I was aware of every word I'd planned not to say. We walked down the corridor toward his office, not into it, just the hallway, quiet now that the team had cleared out. He walked with his hands in his pockets and didn't say anything for a moment. I matched his pace and waited. Good game, he said. Thanks, coach. That breakaway in the third, next time, look for Cole on the back side. He was open. I know. I had the angle. You had one angle. He had another. He glanced at me sideways, not critical, just precise. This was the thing about Coach Harlow, he never missed anything. But you scored, so. The corner of his mouth moved. He'll forgive me. He already has. He told me to tell you you're a ball hog. I laughed. It felt almost normal. We stopped at the end of the corridor near the side exit. He turned to face me, leaning his shoulder against the wall, arms crossed. He had the look he got when he was about to say something that mattered, focused and direct but not unkind. Scouts are coming in 3 weeks, he said. I know. 3 teams confirmed. Could be more. After the season you've been having, he paused, measured. You're in the conversation, Remy. Real conversation. Not as a long shot. I kept my face steady. Okay. You know what that means for these last few weeks. Stay clean. Stay sharp. Stay focused, he said. On the ice. What happens in that arena is the only thing that matters right now. Everything else, he made a small gesture, clearing the air of everything else. It waits. You understand what I'm saying? Yes, sir. He looked at me for a moment. The way he sometimes did, like he was reading something he couldn't quite make out. I met his eyes and held them and said nothing. You're a good kid, he said finally. Quiet, like it wasn't for the hallway. You know that. You came here with nothing and you've built something real. I'm proud of what you've done. My throat did something I wasn't expecting. That means a lot, I said. He nodded once. Pushed off the wall. Get some sleep. We've got a 6 a.m. skate Thursday. Yes, coach. He walked back toward his office. I stood in the empty corridor for a second and then went out the side exit into the cold. The parking lot was dark and almost empty. A few cars left, including mine at the far end, the old black Ford, 140,000 miles on it, best thing my mother ever bought me before she couldn't afford to buy me anything. I walked toward it with my bag over one shoulder and my breath making clouds in the cold air and the good game feeling draining out of me steadily, replaced by something heavier and more complicated. Everything else waits. I got to my truck. Threw my bag in the back. Pulled my keys out. The note was under the driver's side wiper. A folded piece of paper, held flat against the glass by the blade. Plain white. No envelope. I stood there and looked at it for a second before I touched it. Then I pulled it free and unfolded it under the parking lot light. Handwritten. Neat, careful letters. No name at the top, no signature at the bottom. Does Coach know his daughter is in love with his center? She should get home safe tonight. The campus is icy. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, standing very still in the cold with the paper in my hand and the parking lot empty around me. The words were polite. That was the thing that landed hardest. Not threatening, exactly. Not screaming. Just, quiet. Deliberate. The kind of thing someone wrote when they wanted you to know they were in control. When they wanted you to feel the size of what they were holding before they decided what to do with it. I stood there a while longer than I should have. Then I folded the note and put it in my jacket pocket and got in the truck. I sat there with both hands on the wheel and the engine off and the heat not running. I thought about driving to the dorm. I thought about going to sleep, about the 6 a.m. skate Thursday, about scouts in 3 weeks, about stay focused on the ice, everything else waits. I started the engine and drove to Tessa's apartment. I parked 1 block down. Walked through the snow. I was not going to tell her about the note. I made that decision somewhere between the truck and her front door, and I told myself it was because she was already carrying something. I'd felt it for a week, that quiet she got when something was sitting too heavy, and adding this to it tonight wasn't going to help either of us. I told myself I needed a day to think it through first. Figure out where it came from. Handle it. I told myself a lot of things on that walk. I knocked twice. She opened the door with her hair down and a confused look at the time. It was past midnight, and I stepped inside and kissed her once and pulled her close and held on a beat longer than usual. She let me. She put her arms around me and didn't ask any questions right away, just stood there in the dark entryway of her apartment, and I pressed my face into her hair and breathed and told myself that everything was fine. Good game tonight, she said into my shoulder. You watched? I was listening on the radio app. 2 goals. Yeah. She pulled back to look at my face. Her eyes moved across it the way they did when she was assessing something she wasn't going to say out loud. She almost asked. I could see the question form and dissolve. Stay, she said instead. Okay, I said. The note was in my jacket pocket. 3 sentences. I hung the jacket on the hook by her door and sat on her couch and acted like everything was fine. That was my first mistake. Chapter 5. Breakaway. POV, Tessa. His jacket was on the hook by my door when I woke up. I remembered him hanging it there last night, the automatic reach, the metal hook, the way he'd moved like someone who'd put a coat on that hook 100 times and wasn't thinking about it. My apartment had become that kind of place to him. Muscle memory. I lay still for a second, listening. Shower running. Okay. I had maybe 6 minutes. I got up and went to the kitchen to start coffee and then stopped at the door hook on my way past because his keys weren't in his pocket. He always left them in his jacket, and I needed mine from the bowl on the shelf and I'd put them in my jacket last night and my jacket was under his and I reached into his left pocket first by accident. Paper. Folded. I wouldn't have thought anything of it. Receipts, a note from film review, whatever, I almost put it back without opening it. But something about the way it was folded, crisp and deliberate, made me stop. I opened it. I read it. I stood in my kitchen with the paper in my hand and read it again, slower, and by the time I'd finished the second read through, the coffee was the last thing on my mind. Does coach know his daughter is in love with his center? She should get home safe tonight. The campus is icy. The shower turned off. I was still holding the note when he came out of the bathroom with his hair wet and a towel around his neck, reaching for the shirt he'd left on my couch, and he saw me and went completely still. The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. When? I said. His jaw moved. Tessa. When did you get this? Last night. After the game. Under my wiper blade. Last night. I looked at the paper. Then at him. You came here last night and you held me and stayed the whole night and you didn't say a word. I didn't want to. What? What didn't you want to do? My voice was steady. I needed it to stay steady. Scare me. Stress me out. What was the word you picked? He didn't answer. This is not yours to decide, I said. This is about me. My name is in this note, Remy. Someone left this on your truck to let you know they're watching me. And you looked me in the eye all night and said nothing. I was going to tell you. When? When I figured out who wrote it. When I had something useful to say. That is not how this works. I set the paper flat on the kitchen table, like putting it down would make it smaller somehow. It didn't. We talked about this. Remember? Yesterday morning. We figure it out together. We're in this the same amount. You said okay. I know what I said. Then why? Because I am trying to protect you. His voice came out harder than he meant it to. I could tell by the way he pulled it back after a breath, a half-second of control. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know you're going to tell me you don't need protecting. But someone left a note on my truck about you, and they said she should get home safe like they know where you live, and I didn't want you sitting up all night being afraid. So instead I got to wake up to it alone. You're not alone. I'm right here. You're here now. I looked at him and said the actual thing. You were here last night too, and I was still alone in this because you decided I shouldn't know. That's what I'm saying. It's not about the note. It's about you picking what I'm allowed to be scared of. Something moved across his face that wasn't anger. It was closer to the look he got when he knew he was wrong and was dealing with it. He sat down on the couch arm. Put his elbows on his knees. Ran a hand through his still wet hair. You're right, he said. Quiet. I know I'm right. I'm sorry. I looked at him for a moment, the bent head posture, the line of his shoulders, the way he held himself when he was genuinely, uncomfortably sorry. I'd never seen him fake sorry. He didn't know how to. I'm not fragile, I said. I know that. I know you know. But knowing it and acting like it are different things. Yeah. He looked up. I'm working on that. I picked up the note again and brought it to the table and sat down. He came and sat across from me. We looked at it together. Marcus was outside my building last night, I said. Just before 1 a.m. I saw his car at the curb. Remy went very still. I didn't call you, I said, before he could ask. I didn't have proof it was anything. I still don't. It could have been nothing. But you don't think it was nothing? No, I looked at the handwriting on the note. Neat. Patient. The kind of handwriting that didn't rush. I think he's known for longer than the text. I think he's been watching. To what end? I don't know yet. Remy stood up and went to get his shirt from the couch and pulled it on with his back to me. I watched the shift in him, the way his shoulders set, the way his chin came up slightly. The version of him that processed things by going quiet and planning. Don't, I said. He turned. Don't go quiet and go handle it, I said. Not without me. We talk to each other first from now on. Every step. He held my gaze for a long moment. Every step, he said. He left 20 minutes later. I stood at my door and watched him go and then turned back to my apartment, His jacket still on the hook, the note on my kitchen table, the coffee I'd never made. I sat down in front of the note and looked at it until my eyes stopped reading the words and started reading what was behind them instead. Someone was patient. Someone had been watching for a while, long enough to feel confident. And they hadn't gone to my father yet, they'd gone to Remy. Which meant they wanted something. You didn't build a warning like this if your goal was to blow something up. You built it if you wanted to hold something over someone's head. The question was what they wanted. My phone was on the table. I picked it up and scrolled to Juno's name. She picked up on the second ring, already awake because Juno was always awake, one of those people who functioned fully from 6 a.m. without apparent effort. "Hey," she said. "What's wrong?" I looked at the note. "Someone knows," I said. "And I need to think out loud." A short pause on her end. Then, clear and direct, not a shred of "I told you so" in her voice. "Okay. What's the plan?" I exhaled for what felt like the first time that morning. "I'm working on it," I said. "Come over. Bring coffee. I'll explain everything. Give me 20 minutes. Juno." "Yeah. Thank you." I meant it more than the 2 words covered. She knew that. "Obviously," she said, and hung up. I sat at my table with the note in front of me and the empty apartment around me, and I thought about Marcus Webb's neat handwriting and his car at my curb and the smile he'd given me in the bleachers that day at practice, that 1-second look that could have meant anything. Except I was starting to think it only meant one thing. Someone was holding something over us, and they were comfortable. They were settled in. And comfortable people made mistakes eventually, but eventually wasn't good enough when the scouts were coming in 3 weeks and my father's voice on the phone still had no idea and the internship email was still sitting unanswered in my inbox like a door I hadn't decided whether to walk through yet. I needed a plan. I needed one fast. Chapter 6. Cross-check. POV, Remy. I had a system for people I didn't trust. I didn't confront them. I didn't go cold or pull back in ways they'd notice. I just watched. I kept everything on the surface exactly the same eye contact, same easy tone, same locker room rhythm, and underneath I paid attention to every single thing they did. What they said. What they didn't say. When they got close and when they stayed away. My father taught me that without meaning to, back when I was 8 years old and learning that the best way to survive a man with a temper was to read the weather before the storm hit. Some things you learn young and never unlearn. So I went to practice Thursday morning and I was the same as I always was with Marcus Webb. I skated my lines. I took his passes. I gave him mine. When he said something during a drill break I responded like a normal person and not like someone who'd been lying awake at night running a highlight reel of the past 6 weeks trying to figure out what he'd seen, when he'd seen it, and how much of what he was doing was knowledge versus fishing. Practice ended at 9. I was at the stall unlacing when he dropped down next to me. "Grabbing food after this," he said. "You coming?" "I've got film review at 10. After that." I looked at my skate. "Pulled the lace through." "Maybe." "Come on." He leaned back against the stall partition, arms loose at his sides, completely at ease. That was the thing about Marcus, he was always at ease. Even when he shouldn't be. Even when most people would have at least a flicker of something in their face. "You've been in your head all week. I can see it in your skating. You're half a second late on the read every time." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're doing that thing where you tell everyone you're fine so nobody asks follow-up questions." He said it like it was affectionate. Like he knew me. "Seasoned stress." Something like that. He nodded slowly. Then he smiled, that open, no sharp edges smile that I'd been watching all week and still couldn't find the bottom of. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" he said. "Seriously. We've been on this line for 2 years. That means something." I looked at him. He looked back. Steady. Patient. Completely unreadable if you weren't paying close enough attention. "Yeah," I said. "I know." "Good." He stood up, stretched, grabbed his bag. "Film review, then food. Don't bail on me." He walked out. I sat there with my skate in my hand for a moment and then set it down carefully on the floor and breathed through my nose for 3 seconds. Then I went to film review. I bailed on food. I told him I had a class conflict and I watched his face do nothing at all in response, which was its own kind of answer. Then I went back to my room and sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall and did the thing I'd been avoiding doing since the note. I went back through everything. Every practice. Every game. Every time I'd made the drive to Tessa's apartment or walked across campus to meet her or done anything that could have been seen by the wrong set of eyes. I went back 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, laying it all out in sequence and looking for the moment. The problem was there were too many moments. We'd been careful, the rules existed for a reason and we followed them, but careful has limits when you're in the same space as someone who's actively looking. And I was starting to think Marcus had been actively looking for longer than I wanted to admit. I pulled up my laptop and opened the team film archive. Not to watch plays. To watch the crowd. It took me 40 minutes to find it. I was in the footage from the home game 3 weeks ago, the Rochester match, the one where we'd won in overtime, and I was scrubbing through a wide-angle shot from the press camera that caught the crowd behind the near boards. Looking for anything. Looking without knowing exactly what I was looking for. And then I found it. It was maybe 4 seconds of footage, buried in a shot that was meant to capture the ice and caught the first few rows of stands as an afterthought. Row C, Section 2. Tessa was there. I knew she was there because she'd told me after that she'd listened on her phone in the bleachers instead of going home, which was technically against our rules but neither of us could stay all the way mad about it. She was watching the play. Her head was angled toward the ice. And 1 row below her, 3 seats to the right, Marcus Webb was sitting during a line change he should have been watching from the bench. He wasn't watching the game. He was watching the stands. He was watching Tessa watch the game. I pushed back from my desk so fast the chair hit the wall. I sat there and breathed. For seconds of crowd footage, blurry at the edges, and his face turned the wrong way. That was all it was. That was enough. He hadn't stumbled onto this. He hadn't gotten lucky. He'd been looking, and at some point he'd found what he was looking for, and then he'd sat on it. Patient. Easy. Comfortable. Waited until the moment felt right. The question was still the same one I'd been asking since the note: what did he want? Because you didn't build this kind of thing, the text, the note, the car outside her building, if all you wanted to do was blow something up. Blowing it up was easier. One conversation with Coach Harlow and it was done. Marcus hadn't gone to Coach Harlow. Marcus had gone to me, and gone to Tessa, and then gone quiet again. He was waiting. That was the play. Build the pressure. Let it sit. Let us sweat. And when the moment was right he'd tell us what it cost. I closed the laptop. I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling and ran through it again and kept landing on the same place. I didn't know enough yet. I knew what he'd seen. I didn't know what he wanted. And I couldn't go at him directly because the moment I showed my hand, he'd know exactly how much power he had over me. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? That's what line mates are for. I grabbed my pillow off the bed and drove my fist into it once, hard. It didn't help. I did it again anyway. Then I picked up my phone and called Tessa. I found something, I said, when she picked up. Tell me. Game tape. 3 weeks ago. He wasn't watching the ice during a line change. He was in the stands watching you. Silence on her end for a moment. How long was he watching, she said. Long enough to see you watching me. Another silence. Longer. So he built this on purpose, she said. Not a question. Yeah. That means he's been planning something. Yeah. Which means the text and the note aren't the whole thing. Her voice was thinking out loud now, moving through it the way she did when she was working a problem. They're the setup. He's working toward something specific. That's what I think. We need to know what before he shows his hand. She paused. Remy. Be careful. Don't let him see that you know. I won't. I mean it. He's been patient for weeks. If he thinks you're onto him he'll move faster than we're ready for. I know how to keep a straight face, Tessa. I know you do. The line went quiet for a second. I'm scared. She said it flat and honest with no decoration on it, the way she said the things that cost her something to admit. I held the phone and felt the weight of it. I'm going to figure this out, I said. We are, she said. We are. I meant it this time. After we hung up, I lay in the dark for a long time. I kept thinking about Marcus's face in that crowd footage, turned the wrong direction. 4 seconds. Patient as a person who's already decided how the story ends. I thought about the fact that he'd sat with us at every team dinner this season. That he'd covered my back in a game 3 weeks ago when a Dartmouth winger had come at me cheap after a whistle. That I had told him things, small things, nothing important, but things, because I'd thought he was my teammate and my teammate meant something. I thought about that for a while. Then I opened the laptop back up and watched those 4 seconds one more time. Chapter 7. Penalty Box. POV, Tessa. I asked Juno straight out, standing in my kitchen at 8 a.m. with both of us holding coffee, no warm-up, no soft entry. Did you tell anyone? She looked at me over the rim of her mug. Her expression didn't shift. That was how I knew Juno well enough to read her. She didn't perform innocence, didn't get defensive, didn't immediately start explaining herself. She just looked at me with that flat, clear-eyed look and answered. No. Nobody. Not even accidentally. Not even a hint of something to someone who might have. Tessa. Her voice was even. I haven't said your name and his name in the same sentence to a single living person in 3 months. Not my lab partner. Not my mom. Not the one friend from home I actually trust. Nobody. I looked at her. I know, she said, quieter. I know you have to ask. That's fine. But no. It wasn't me. I set my coffee down and sat at the table. Juno sat across from me. Outside the window it was snowing again, that fine, dry snow that came sideways and didn't stick, just moved through the air and made everything look harder to see. Remy found something on the game tape, I said. Marcus, watching me in the stands 3 weeks ago. During his own line change. Juno processed this without visible reaction for about 4 seconds. That was her tell, not expression, just the brief pause where she was reorganizing information. So he's been building this, she said. That's what Remy thinks. That's what I think. And you still don't know what he wants. Not yet. She wrapped both hands around her mug and was quiet for a moment. He's on the same line as Remy. He sees him every day. If he wanted to burn you both down he already would have. I know. So he wants something he can only get by holding this over you. That's as far as I've gotten. Juno nodded once, like she was filing it. This was what I needed her for, not just someone who knew, but someone who thought clearly and didn't let the emotional weight of a thing cloud the practical shape of it. She was going to be a doctor. She approached problems the way I imagined she'd approach a diagnosis, gather the data, look at it without flinching, figure out what it's actually telling you. You need to get ahead of him, she said. I know. Does Remy know that? Remy knows. Whether he'll actually let me be ahead of it with him is a different question. Juno gave me a look. He's trying, I said. He really is. I know he is. She stood up and refilled her coffee. I'm not on his case. I just know you, and I know that the moment someone starts trying to protect you from something is the moment you dig in and handle it yourself. Which is fine. Just make sure you're not handling it so hard in one direction that you miss what's coming from another. I looked at my phone on the table. One unread email. I'd been looking at it all morning and hadn't opened it yet. There's something else, I said. Okay. I turned my phone so she could see the notification. The subject line. She leaned forward and read it and her eyebrows went up slightly, not a lot, just enough. Boston, she said. Yeah. When did this come? 4 days ago. She looked at me. You've been sitting on this for 4 days. I've been sitting on a lot of things. Tessa. I know. I pulled the phone back and opened the email and pushed it across the table to her. She read it properly this time, all 3 paragraphs, while I sat there and watched her face and thought about how strange it was to want two completely incompatible things at the exact same time and not be able to explain either one without it sounding like a betrayal of the other. Juno finished reading and sat back. "This is a real offer," she said. "I know it is. Sports Science Lab at BU, paid. That kind of thing doesn't come around twice." "I know. January 15th. She did the calculation out loud. Right in the middle of everything." "I know." She looked at me carefully. "Have you told Remy?" "No." "Are you going to?" "Yes." I took the phone back. I need to know what I want first. Before I say it out loud to him. Because the second I say it out loud to him it becomes about us instead of about me, and I need to think about it as mine first. Juno was quiet for a moment. "That's actually very smart," she said. "Don't sound surprised." "I'm not surprised. She picked up her mug. "I'm proud of you for that. A year ago you would have just made the decision based on what was easiest for everyone else." I didn't say anything. She wasn't wrong. I'd been drafting the acceptance email since the night I got the offer. I'd written 4 different versions, each one more decisive than the last, and deleted all of them. Not because I didn't want the internship. I did. I wanted it the way you wanted something when it felt exactly like the shape of the life you'd been trying to build, specific and real and yours. I deleted them because every time I finished a draft, I read it back and heard the sound of 400 miles of highway between me and everything that was happening here, and I couldn't tell if I was running towards something or away from it. That was the question I needed to answer before I hit send. My father's invitation came that afternoon. A film session, Thursday evening. He was opening it up to me as part of the thesis research. "You want to see how the team processes performance data? Come watch how we break down tape." He'd been resisting this particular ask for weeks, but apparently the win against Kendall had put him in a generous enough mood. I said yes. Because it was my research. Because I was professional. I told myself that all the way to the arena Thursday night. The film room was in the lower level, a long narrow space with 3 rows of chairs facing a screen, the projector mounted on the ceiling, the walls covered in the kind of dry erase diagrams that coaches left half-finished and never fully erased. It smelled like coffee and old whiteboard marker. The team was already settled when I came in. I found a seat in the back row with my clipboard and my recorder running and my professional observer face fully in place. My father was at the front, clicker in hand, already moving through footage. I did not look at the second row, 3rd seat from the left. I looked at my clipboard. I looked at the screen. I looked at the back of various heads. I wrote down nothing useful for the first 10 minutes because I was spending all of my available focus on the single task of not letting my eyes drift left and down. We'd been doing this for a year. We were good at it. But there was a quality to this particular room, the closeness, the low lighting, the fact that I could hear him breathing from 3 rows back, that made the practiced neutral harder to maintain than usual. My father was talking about defensive zone coverage. The screen showed a play from the Rochester game, the near miss in the second that had almost cost us the lead. He broke it down in segments, pausing, rewinding, pausing again. The team was quiet and focused the way they got in film sessions, that particular concentrated attention that was different from practice, more internal. I made myself write actual notes. Response variance under defensive pressure, observation, consistent positioning, minimal hesitation mid-play. Real sentences. Real data. It helped. And then, 15 minutes in, I felt it. Not from Remy's direction. From the other side of the room. I kept writing. I kept my eyes on my clipboard. But the peripheral awareness I'd trained myself to have in spaces where I needed to stay alert, I felt it land on me like something with weight. I looked up. Marcus was in the far left seat of the front row. He'd turned his head, just slightly, just enough to see back toward where I was sitting. His face was turned toward the screen again almost before I registered that it had moved. But he'd smiled. Not at the footage. Not at something my father said. At me. 1 second, barely visible in the low light, just the corner of his mouth and that patient, settled quality he had when he thought he was already 3 moves ahead. I looked back at my clipboard. My pen was still. I made myself move it. That smile, I wrote, and then stopped, because what I was writing had nothing to do with athletic performance data and everything to do with the fact that my hands had gone cold. I wrote it anyway. That smile is a warning. Chapter 8. 5-Minute Major. POV, Remy. He waited 9 days. I want to say I was ready when it came. I'd been watching him for 9 days, tracking every conversation, every glance, every time he came close and every time he kept his distance. 9 days of running the same careful performance and watching him run his, two people pretending very hard to be exactly what they'd always been. But the truth is you can't fully prepare for the moment someone decides to show you the knife. You can know it's coming. You can see their hand move toward their jacket. And it still lands different than you thought it would. It was a Thursday. Practice had gone long, 40 extra minutes of special teams work because Coach Harlow had decided our power play needed surgery, and by the time we were done everybody was tight and done and ready to be anywhere else. The team cleared out fast. I stayed back to talk to the equipment manager about getting my left skate re-edged before the weekend, and by the time I finished it was just me and the empty hallway and the equipment room at the end of it. I was reaching for the door when Marcus came around the corner from the bathroom corridor. He wasn't rushing. He stopped when he saw me, and the fact that he stopped, that he didn't just nod and keep moving, that his whole body settled into the specific posture of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this, told me everything before he opened his mouth. "Hey," he said. "Easy. You got a minute?" Every instinct I had said to walk past him and not look back. "Sure," I said. He pushed the equipment room door open and went in. I followed. The room was small and low-lit, smelling of rubber and cold gear, skates on racks, sticks along the far wall, the chemical bite of skate sharpener fluid in the air. The door swung shut behind us. He didn't pace. He didn't build to it. He just turned and looked at me with his hands in his pockets and said, "I saw you two at the bookstore cafe on the 12th, holding hands." The air in the room went very still. I kept my face exactly where it was. I didn't move. Marcus let the silence sit for a full 5 seconds. He was watching me with that flat, comfortable expression, not cruel, not triumphant, just settled. Like he'd been holding something heavy for a while and was finally putting it down on a table between us. "She's Coach's daughter, Remy." "I know who she is." "Then you know what it means. What it would do to the program. To Coach. To your," he paused, picked the word carefully. "To your position here." I looked at him. "What do you want, Marcus?" He blinked, just once, the smallest crack in the easy surface, like he hadn't expected me to skip ahead that fast. Then he recovered it. "I'm not going to say anything." He held both hands up briefly, a show of reasonableness. "Obviously. You're my guy. I'm not trying to blow anything up here. He tilted his head. I need something." "What?" "Alternate captain." He said it the same way he'd say anything else. Like it was reasonable. Like it wasn't Marcus Webb asking Remy Callahan to hand him a position over the person who actually deserved it. Cole's got the spot right now. That's not the right call and Coach knows it, but he won't pull the trigger without input from you. You put my name in, just mention it, just get him thinking, and I'll handle the rest. Do it this week, before the scouts come." I didn't say anything for a moment. "That's all," he said. "Nothing dramatic. Easy. Easy." He said it like the word was a gift. I thought about Cole Drayton. Cole who'd been on this team for 3 years. Cole who ran the power play, who talked guys off ledges in hard losses, who had covered my back in more games than I could count and never once asked for anything back. Cole who'd cried at Cole's own grandfather's funeral and come to practice the next morning because he said being on the ice made him feel close to him. Cole who had told me, 2 weeks ago in this same building, that whatever was going on with me I could tell him and he'd keep it quiet. Cole who had kept it quiet. I thought about Tessa in her apartment with the note on her kitchen table. About Marcus's car at her curb. About 4 seconds of crowd footage with his face turned the wrong way. I thought about all of it and I looked at Marcus Webb and I said, "We're done here." Something moved in his face. Brief and small and quickly covered. "Remy. We're done." I kept my voice level. No anger in it, no heat. Just flat. Whatever you think you saw, whatever you think you're holding, I'm telling you right now that this conversation is over. He looked at me for a long moment. The easy manner had pulled back a degree, showing something underneath it, not anger, not quite. More like the expression of someone recalibrating. Running a new calculation. Then he smiled. Sure, he said pleasantly. For now. He walked past me and pushed through the equipment room door like we'd just been talking about practice. The door swung shut. I stood in the empty room and breathed. The cold air. The smell of rubber and skate sharpener. The particular quiet of a space that had just held something bad and was already forgetting about it. My hands were steady. I'd held them steady the whole time, and I held them steady now, standing alone in a room that no one else would walk back into tonight. For now. 2 words. Calm as anything. Comfortable as a person who doesn't need to rush because they're already exactly where they want to be. I stayed in that room for maybe 2 minutes. Letting it settle. Letting my head catch up to what my body already knew, that the shape of everything had just changed, that the thing that had been coming toward us in slow motion had arrived, and that we're done here was not the end of this conversation, not even close. Then I pulled out my phone. Tessa picked up before the second ring. He moved, I said. I heard her breath shift. When? Just now. Equipment room. What does he want? Alternate captain over Cole. He wants me to push Harlow to give him the spot before the scouts come. Silence on her end. 3 seconds, 4. What did you say? She asked. I told him we were done. And? He said for now. I pushed through the equipment room door into the empty hallway. He's not done, Tessa. He's just getting started. Another silence. Different quality this time, not shock. More like someone who'd been expecting a diagnosis and was now sitting with the confirmation. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Are you? I'm fine. She said it before I could finish asking. I'm thinking. Give me a second. I walked down the empty corridor toward the exit and gave her the second. We can't wait anymore, she said finally. Whatever we're going to do, we have to decide now. Because he's not going to give us time to think about it. That's the whole point. He wants us scrambling. I know. So we don't scramble. What do we do instead? The question sat in the air between us through 4 seconds of phone silence. We get ahead of it, she said. Before he can move again. I pushed through the side exit into the cold. The night hit me, sharp and clean and fully real in a way the inside of buildings never was. I stood in the parking lot with my phone and my bag and the weight of everything that had just shifted. Okay, I said. Come over tonight, Tessa said. We need to talk. Actually talk. All of it. I'll be there in an hour. Don't park a block down, she said. Just park out front. I stopped walking. Tessa. I mean it. I'm done performing normal when normal is already gone. Just park out front. I stood there for a second. Then I looked up at the parking lot, at the empty spaces, at the building behind me going dark window by window as people left for the night. Okay, I said. I'll see you in an hour. She hung up. I stood in the cold and looked at my truck parked where I always parked it and thought about how small some things were, parking 1 block over, keeping your face neutral, speaking in a voice low enough that only one person could hear, and how much weight a person could put on small things for a very long time before the weight became too much. I drove to her building. I parked out front. Chapter 9. Reading the play. POV, Tessa. He said he was handling it. He said it Friday morning when I asked how he was doing. He said it Saturday after practice when I asked if anything else had happened. He said it Sunday on the phone when I told him I felt like he was a half step away from me and I couldn't figure out what was in the gap. I'm handling it, Tessa. You keep saying that. Because it's true. That's not actually an answer. I don't have a better one right now. I let it go. That was the thing I kept doing, letting it go, giving him the room he was asking for, telling myself he'd come to me when he was ready the same way I'd come to him when I was ready about Boston. Except I knew the difference between two people both needing space to think and one person pulling away while calling it handling. This was the second one. The problem with knowing someone well was that you could feel the exact shape of what they were keeping from you. Not the content, just the weight of it, the specific density. Like something pressing on the other side of a wall. I went to the library Sunday afternoon instead of sitting in my apartment waiting for my phone to do something. I spread my thesis notes across a table in the back corner and tried to work, and for about an hour I actually managed it. Data tables, observation logs, cross-referencing my practice notes against the performance metrics my father's staff compiled after each session. Real work. Useful work. Then I closed my laptop and sat there. Cole Drayton had office hours on Monday mornings for the peer tutoring program he ran through the athletic department. I knew this because I'd seen it in the team schedule I had access to through my research. I also knew that Cole was the kind of person who talked openly about team dynamics because he genuinely believed that talking openly about things made them better. He wasn't a gossip. He was just honest in the way some people were honest, freely, without calculating the cost first. I pulled out my thesis notebook and wrote leadership structure and team cohesion, informal interview at the top of a fresh page. Then I went to find him. He was in a study room off the main floor, sitting across from a freshman with a physics textbook between them. I waited in the corridor until the session wrapped up and the freshman left with the slightly dazed look of someone who just had calculus explained to them 4 different ways. Cole came out and saw me and stopped. He had the look he sometimes got around me now, not uncomfortable exactly, more like a person who was carrying something awkward and didn't know how to hold it. Tessa. He glanced down the hall in both directions. Hey. Hi. Do you have a few minutes? For my thesis. I'm doing informal interviews on team culture and leadership and my advisor wants some qualitative data to go with the performance metrics. He studied me for a second. Cole Drayton was not a stupid person. He knew I was something to Remy, he'd known for 2 weeks and he'd kept it, and I could see him working out whether this conversation was research or something else. It was both. I didn't feel bad about that. Sure, he said. Yeah, come in. We sat across from each other in the study room with the door open. I had my notebook. He had his coffee. I asked him 3 real questions about team culture, how leadership communicated across lines, how conflict typically resolved within the group, how players responded to performance pressure from coaching staff versus from each other. He answered all 3 thoughtfully and honestly and I wrote actual notes because they were actually useful. Then I asked, have there been any shifts in the team dynamic this season that felt different from previous years? He was quiet for a moment. Not reluctant, thinking. There's been some noise, he said carefully. About leadership. Nothing directed at coach, just some of the guys talking about whether the current structure is the right structure. What kind of structure conversation? Alternate captain stuff. He turned his coffee cup in a circle. There's been some talk about whether the current setup is the best use of what the team has right now. From players generally, or from someone specific. He looked at me. A beat. Someone specific, he said. Without naming names, is this something that feels organic to you? Like a natural conversation about team development? Or does it feel like it's coming from somewhere particular? Cole set his coffee down. He wasn't looking at the notebook or the table. He was looking at me with that straight, clear look he had. Tessa. He said my name quietly. What are you actually asking me? I looked back at him. I'm asking if Marcus Webb has been lobbying for your spot. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. That's not, I don't, he stopped. Ran a hand over the back of his neck. How did you know that? I'm doing research on team dynamics, I said. I observe things. He stared at me. He wasn't angry. He was doing what Cole always did, putting pieces together behind his eyes and arriving somewhere he didn't fully want to be. He's been vocal, Cole said finally. Careful with every word. In the locker room, in film review. Talking about fresh energy at the top, leadership changes, the team needing different voices in the second half. Nothing direct. Nothing that would get him in trouble. Just, present. Constant. Has he said anything to Remy? Another silence. Longer. I don't know, Cole said. And I could tell he wasn't sure if that was true. I wrote something in my notebook that had nothing to do with what we were actually talking about. Thanks, Cole, I said. This is helpful. He watched me close my notebook. Is Remy okay? Ask him, I said. He'd want you to ask him. I called Remy from the parking lot. He picked up on the third ring. I could hear the echo of the corridor behind him. He was still in the athletic building. He went to you, didn't he? I said. The pause was exactly as long as I needed it to be to know the answer. Remy. Yeah. I stood by my car in the cold and breathed through the thing moving through my chest that was not quite anger and not quite hurt and was actually both of them pressed together so tightly they'd become a third thing I didn't have a name for. And you were going to handle it without telling me. The pause this time was different. Shorter. Resigned. Yeah, he said. When were you going to tell me? When I figured out what to do about it. That could have been never. It wouldn't have been never. You don't know that. I kept my voice even. I was not going to do this in a parking lot at volume. You keep making that call. What I can handle, what I need to know, what's worth telling me versus what you'd rather absorb yourself so I don't have to. And I keep telling you it's not your call to make. I know. Do you? Tessa. I'm not angry. I said it before he could read it as something it wasn't. I'm not, it's not anger. I just feel like I'm standing on my side of something and you're on your side of it and we're both looking at the same problem and somehow we're still not actually together on it. He didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, the cold was doing the thing it did in January, settling into your coat through the layers, making your hands feel like they belonged to someone who'd been standing still for too long. I should have gotten in the car. I stayed where I was. I don't know how to stop doing it, he said finally. Quiet. I know it's wrong. I know it's not what you want. And then something happens and my first instinct is still, just let me take this one. Just let me put my body between you and this one thing. I don't know how to make that instinct stop. I leaned against my car door. The metal was cold through my jacket. I know, I said. And I did. I understood where it came from, the house he'd grown up in, the particular way he'd been shaped by years of having to be the person who held things together because no one else would. I understood it completely. That didn't make it hurt less. I'm sorry, he said. I know that too. We sat in the silence of the phone line for a moment. Not fighting. Not resolved. Just two people who loved each other and kept landing in the same gap between what they meant and what they managed to do, and neither of them quite knowing how to close it. What did he ask for? I said. Alternate captain over Cole. Wants me to plant the idea with your dad this week. And you said. I told him we were done. And he said. For now. I pushed off the car and got in out of the cold. Okay, I said. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Neither of us said anything for a bit. Remy. Yeah. Next time something happens, anything, a text, a note, a look across a room, you tell me same day. Not when you figured out what to do about it. Same day. A beat. Same day, he said. Promise me. I promise. I started my car and sat with the heat running and the phone still to my ear. He didn't hang up. Neither did I. We just sat on the line for another minute, breathing, not saying anything, which was its own kind of conversation that covered all the things we couldn't quite get right yet. When we finally hung up I drove home in the dark and the quiet, and I thought about the gap that kept opening between us, not because we didn't love each other, but because we did, and love had a way of making people hold things tighter than they should. That was the part that scared me more than Marcus Webb. Chapter 10. Ice time. POV, Remy. I'd been in Coach Harlow's office maybe 50 times. I knew the exact creak of the chair across from his desk. I knew the framed photo on the left wall, the 2019 conference championship, the one he'd won 2 years before I got here, his whole staff around him with the trophy and the look of people who'd been working towards something for years and finally got there. I knew the dry erase board behind his desk with the current season's game schedule and the losses circled in red and the wins left unmarked, because Harlow said wins were expected and only losses needed examining. I knew this room the way I knew a few rooms in my life, the kitchen of my mother's house in Duluth, the equipment room at the first rink that ever let me practice for free when I was 12, Tessa's apartment. Rooms that had become part of how I understood where I was in the world. I knocked on the open door at 5 on Monday. He looked up from his laptop. "Callahan. Come in." I sat in the chair across from his desk. He closed the laptop and gave me his full attention the way he always did, that particular quality of his, the one that made every player on his roster feel like the only person in the room when they were sitting across from him. I'd seen him do it with 40 different guys. It still worked on me every time. "You asked to talk," he said. "Yeah." I'd practiced how to start this. I'd written it out in my phone notes at midnight and deleted it and rewritten it twice. The version I'd landed on was, "I want to talk about the leadership structure for the second half of the season. I think there are some adjustments worth looking at. Clean. Specific. Opening a door without walking through it yet." He waited. I opened my mouth. "I've been thinking about my game," I said. "Not what I planned. Not even close." But the moment I'd sat down and looked at his face, the face that had looked at me across that recruiting table 5 years ago and called me son without blinking, my throat had just closed around the real reason I was here. Like my body overruled my brain before I could stop it. He leaned back in his chair. "What about it?" I went with it. I'd come here for one reason and was now here for a different one, and the only thing I could do was make it count. "My transition speed," I said. "You've been calling me on it. Half a second off the draw. I want to figure out what's creating it." He looked at me for a moment, that reading look, the one he'd been pointing at me for 5 years. "When did you start noticing it?" "Few weeks ago." "Is it physical or mental?" "Mental. My body knows the read. I'm getting into my head on the decision." He nodded slowly. This was the kind of conversation we had, specific, honest, no wasted words. He pulled a notepad toward him. "Walk me through it. When does it happen most?" "When the play is contested. When the outcome isn't obvious. Easy reads I'm fine. It's the 50-50 moments where I'm losing the half second. Fear of the wrong call." "Yeah. You've never had that before." "I know. So something's changed." He looked at me across the desk. Not accusatory. Just precise. "Off the ice carrying over?" I looked at the notepad in front of him. "Some things are complicated right now. Anything you want to get into?" "Nothing I can't manage." He held my gaze for a second. Then he wrote something and moved on. We talked about the skating for 20 minutes, drills, mental reset techniques, some adjustments to my pre-draw routine. It was a real conversation, the kind we'd had 100 times, and by the end I had 3 concrete things to work on and the specific sense of calm I always got from sitting across from him. Like the world had edges again. He walked me through a sequence on the dry erase board. I stood beside him and watched him draw arrows and talked back and let myself just be in this room being a player getting coaching from a coach, and pushed everything else to the back. He capped his marker. "Tessa's been quiet lately," he said. "Casual. Just setting it down there." I kept my eyes on the board. "Have you noticed?" he said. "She's at practice most days for the research and I feel like I can't read her. She seems like she's carrying something." "She's under a lot of pressure with the thesis," I said. Steady voice. Steady eyes. "Exactly as planned." "Maybe." He set the marker down. Turned to face the window for a moment. "She tell you much? When you talk at practice?" "Not much. She keeps it professional. She's serious about the research." "She would be." Something shifted in his tone, quieter, lower, like he was talking more to himself. "You two get along okay? She mentioned you a couple times." I felt the question land in the back of my throat. "Yeah. Yeah. She's good people." "She is." He said it without looking at me, still at the window, and the certainty in it hit different than I expected. Not a coaching observation. Just the plain truth of a person saying something they knew in their bones. "She's the best person I know. And I've spent most of her life putting this team first." A pause. I think about that. He said it so simply that I didn't have an answer for it. There wasn't one. I'd been building a version of Coach Harlow in my head for the past few weeks that made the situation easier to manage. The version where he was the obstacle, the authority, the complication, the person between us and the ability to just be normal. The version I could stay at arm's length from because it was easier to be careful around something you'd made slightly smaller than it actually was. Then he stood at his window at 5 in the afternoon and said, "She's the best person I know with that particular weight, the weight of someone who knew they'd gotten things wrong and was still carrying it," and the version I'd built came apart. "She talks about her mom sometimes," I said. Because I had to say something. Because the silence was going to break me if I let it sit. "I think that relationship is good. She seems grounded." He nodded slowly. "Her mother's a better person than I gave her credit for." "Is what it is." He turned from the window. The professional face was back, not cold, just resettled. "Anyway. The draw timing. Work the reset drill I showed you for 2 sessions and we'll reassess." "Yes, sir." "Good talk, Callahan." I got up. I got my jacket off the back of the chair. I was at the door when he said, without looking up from his notepad, "The thing that's complicated. Whatever it is." He wrote something. "You can bring it here. When you're ready. You know that." I stood at the door for 1 second. "I know," I said. I walked down the corridor and out the side exit and stood in the cold outside the building and put my face up toward the sky and breathed through my nose for a long time. He was a man who knew he'd spent 20 years choosing the wrong thing. Who was sitting with that, quietly, alone, without asking anyone to fix it. Who called me son at a recruiting table when I was 17 years old and hungry and had no idea what it felt like to be in a room with someone who thought I was worth investing in. I wanted to go back in there. I wanted to sit back down in that chair and just say it, "I love your daughter, I've loved her for a year, I'm sorry I hid it and I don't regret it and I don't know what that does to us but I can't keep looking you in the eye without you knowing." I wanted to. I didn't. I drove to Tessa's instead and sat on her couch for 2 hours without telling her exactly how the conversation had gone, which was its own kind of failure, small and private and entirely mine. Chapter 11. Behind the Mask. POV, Tessa. I called my mother on a Tuesday night when the snow was coming down hard enough that the parking lot outside my window had disappeared. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice had that specific sound it got when she was in her kitchen, warm background noise, something on the stove, the particular aliveness of a house where people cooked and talked and moved around each other without anyone holding their breath. "Tessa." "Hey." "Hey, Mom." "Hold on." I heard her turn something down on the stove. "Okay. What's wrong?" I'd learned this about my mother over the years, she didn't need a warm-up. She didn't need small talk to find the real topic. She just pointed herself at it the moment she heard something in my voice. "Nothing's wrong exactly," I said. "Things are just complicated." "Tell me." I'd thought about how to say this on the drive from campus. I'd run about 4 versions of it, the one where I told her everything, the one where I told her almost nothing, the one where I cried about it which I wasn't planning to do. I'd landed somewhere in the middle. "There's someone," I said. A short beat. "Okay," she said. "Even." No leap to it. It's complicated because of who he is. Because of context. I stared at the snow. "Dad can't know yet." "How long?" "A year." Silence for a moment. I could hear her thinking through that, the weight of it, the shape of a year kept quiet. "Is he good to you?" she asked. "Yes." No hesitation. "Does he know you?" "The actual you." I thought about the reading glasses. The way he moved my shoes out of the doorway. The night he drove me home from the arena at 1 a.m. and listened for 2 hours to me talk about sports psychology theory without looking like he was waiting for me to stop. "Yeah," I said. "He sees me." "Then the complication is about your father." "The complication is completely about my father." She exhaled, not a sigh, more like she was settling into the conversation, getting comfortable with the weight of it. "You know it can't stay secret." "Right. At some point." "I know. He's going to find out." On his terms or yours. Those are the only two options. I know, Mom. What I can't figure out is how to make it mine. Why can't you? Because there are other people involved in the timing right now. People who might take that away from me if we don't move fast enough. A longer pause. She was reading between that. Someone's pushing the situation, she said. Something like that. Then you already know what you have to do. She said it plainly, no drama attached. If someone else controls the timing, you lose. The only way you win is to go first. I know. I pressed my fingers against the cold glass of the window. What I'm scared of is what going first does to him. To Remy. I'd said his name without meaning to. She didn't react to it. His whole career is built on his relationship with Dad. His scholarship, his draft potential, all of it runs through this program. If Dad reacts badly, then you choose whose life you're protecting, my mother said. Quiet. Direct. The snow came sideways for a moment against the glass. Did you ever have to make that choice? I asked. A pause. The kind that meant I'd hit something real. Your father and I, she stopped. Started again. There were things we didn't tell each other in the beginning. Things we thought we were protecting each other from. And by the time we said them out loud we were already too far into the pattern to fix it. She paused. I'm not saying the secret was why we ended. I'm saying it didn't help. The hiding teaches you that the truth isn't safe. And once you both believe that, it becomes self-fulfilling, I said. Yeah. A quiet moment. Go first, Tessa. Pick your moment, but make it yours. And tell him before you tell your father, because he deserves that. After we hung up I sat at my desk for a long time. The internship email was still open in my browser. I'd been opening it and closing it for 10 days. 17 drafts started and deleted. The deadline was at the end of the week. I opened a new draft. Dear Dr. Ashby, thank you for the offer. I stopped. Read it back. Deleted it. I opened another new draft. Dear Dr. Ashby, I am writing to formally accept. I read it. Stared at it. My cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. I thought about what my mother had said. You choose whose life you're protecting. The thing was I didn't want to choose. I didn't want Remy's career on one side of a scale and my future on the other, because that framing made it sound like one of us had to lose and I'd spent enough of my life believing that was how things worked. The coach's daughter learning to stay in the background so she didn't cost anyone anything. I hit backspace until the draft was empty. Then I opened a third one and wrote something different. Dear Dr. Ashby, I am writing to accept your offer with great enthusiasm. I look forward to beginning January 15th. I read it 3 times. Then I took a breath and hit send before I could change my mind. It was done. The moment the sent confirmation appeared I sat back and waited to feel scared. I felt something else instead, the specific lightness of a person who had made a decision that was entirely, purely theirs. Not for anyone else. Not against anyone else. Just mine. I needed to tell Remy. Tonight. I picked up my phone and texted him. We need to have a plan. A real one. Come over. His reply came back in under 2 minutes. Leaving now. I got up and cleared the kitchen table, pushed the thesis notes into a pile, moved the laptop, set out 2 glasses of water because he'd been forgetting to drink water during the pressure stretch of the season and I'd appointed myself in charge of that without telling him. I made the apartment a little warmer, turned a lamp on against the dark outside. I thought about what my mother had said, the hiding teaches you that the truth isn't safe. We'd been hiding for a year. Not because we were ashamed. Not because it wasn't real. But because real things were terrifying to put in front of the world, and it had been so easy to keep it ours, warm and private and protected, that we'd let ours become a synonym for secret, and those 2 things were not the same. He knocked twice. I opened the door. He came in and looked at my face and didn't say anything for a second, just stood in the doorway reading whatever he found there. Then he came in and I closed the door and he put his arms around me right there in the entryway, and I let him, and we stood like that without talking for a minute. Boston, I said into his shoulder. He pulled back enough to look at me. I accepted it, I said. Something moved through his face, fast and complicated, and he let me see all of it instead of smoothing it over. The surprise and the weight, and underneath both of those things, barely visible but there, the pride. Straightforward and real. Okay, he said. I should have told you before I decided. I know that. You needed to decide it for yourself first. I did. I really did. I looked at him. 4 hours, Remy. Boston's 4 hours. I know how far Boston is. I need you to hear that and not disappear into managing it. I'm telling you, and I need you to actually be here for it. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he pulled me back in and held on. I'm here, he said. Into my hair. I'm right here. We sat at the kitchen table and we talked. Actually talked, not around things, not with one eye on the door. I told him about my mother. He told me about Coach Harlow's office, the real version, the one he'd been carrying since Monday. We talked about Marcus and the timeline and what going first would actually mean and how terrifying it was and how we were going to do it anyway. It took 3 hours. The water got warm and I made tea instead, and we sat with our knees almost touching at the kitchen table and built something together out of honesty and the specific kind of tired that came from finally putting things down. At some point past midnight he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Just left it there. We're going to tell him, he said. Yes. And it might go badly. It might. But it's ours. He said it the way he said things he meant, completely, flat and direct, no ornament. Whatever happens. It's ours. I turned my hand over under his. It's ours, I said. I didn't know yet that this was the last night it would be just ours. That tomorrow someone else would start moving, and the quiet we'd built in this kitchen would be the last quiet for a long time. I didn't know. So I just sat there in the warm kitchen with his hand over mine, and let it be enough. Chapter 12. Center ice. POV, Remy. I found him before practice. That was deliberate. I needed him off balance, not settled into the rhythm of the day yet, not warmed up and comfortable and running whatever version of himself he put on inside that building. I needed him in the parking lot at 6:45 a.m. with his bag over his shoulder and his coffee still in his hand. He saw me coming and slowed his walk. I stopped in front of him. We need to finish the conversation. He glanced around the lot. Empty except for 2 assistant coaches' cars at the far end. Then he looked back at me, and whatever he read in my face made something shift behind his eyes, a small recalibration, the kind you could only catch if you knew to look for it. Sure, he said. Easy as anything. We stood there in the cold parking lot with the arena door 30 feet behind him and the gray January sky above us, and I said the thing I'd been turning over since Tessa's kitchen table at midnight, the thing that had kept me awake not because I was afraid of it but because I needed to say it exactly right. I'm not doing it, I said. Not now, not next week, not ever. You want the alternate captain spot, earn it. I'm not going to coach Harlow for you. He nodded slowly. Like he was following along. And whatever you've got, the text, the note, the photo from the 12th, whatever else you're holding, do what you want with it. I held his gaze straight. Go ahead. Tell him. The parking lot went very quiet. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. The easy manner had gone somewhere, not replaced by anger, not by panic. Just replaced by a kind of stillness that was different from his usual performance of calm. This was actual stillness. Like he was genuinely surprised, and the surprise had stripped away the layer he usually kept on top. You sure about that? He said. Yeah. He searched my face. I let him search it. Okay, he said. He picked up his bag and walked past me toward the arena door. No for now this time. No parting smile. Just okay, and footsteps on cold asphalt, and the heavy door swinging shut behind him. I stood in the empty parking lot and breathed. My hands were shaking, not much, just a small current running under the surface that I'd been holding back the whole conversation. I pressed them flat against my thighs for a second and let it move through. Then I picked up my own bag and went inside. 3 days passed. Nothing happened. I kept waiting. Every time my phone lit up, every time someone came toward me in a hallway, every time I walked into a room and scanned it on instinct, I was waiting. Tuesday. Wednesday. Thursday morning. Nothing. No text, no note, no conversation that started with "Coach, there's something you need to know." By Thursday afternoon I'd started to think the bluff had worked. That Marcus had looked at my face in that parking lot and done the math and decided there was nothing left to leverage. I didn't let myself fully believe it yet. But I felt some of the coiled thing in my chest start to loosen. The scouts came Thursday evening. There were 3 of them, 2 from organizations I recognized immediately by the colors of their credentials, one I had to look up when I got back to the locker room. They sat in the second row of the press side bleachers with their clipboards and their neutral expressions and watched warm-ups with the specific kind of attention that was different from everyone else's attention. More like assessment. More like math. I'd been telling myself for weeks that I wasn't nervous about this. That I was going to play my game, the way I always played my game, and what they saw was what they'd get and that was enough. I believed that in the abstract. Standing on the ice in warm-ups and knowing exactly which row they were sitting in, that was different from the abstract. Stay on the ice, Tessa had said last night. The moment you start thinking about the stands you've already lost half a second. I did my edge work. I took my warm-up shots. I found the feel of the ice under my blades and I let everything else go quiet and I stayed there. We won 5-1. I had 2 goals and 2 assists. The first goal came off a draw in the offensive zone where I won the puck clean to the left point and drove hard to the net and put away the rebound on my backhand, the kind of play that wasn't flashy but showed every piece of what a center needed to do. The second one was late in the second, short-handed, a breakaway I'd earned off an aggressive back check that nobody expected from a player who hadn't committed to the defensive side of the game 2 years ago. The assists were both primary. Both off reads that were there for maybe half a second before they closed. I felt good. Clean and focused and completely inside the game in the way that only happened maybe a dozen times in a season, where the ice was the whole world and everything on it made sense and you were just playing, not thinking about playing. After the final buzzer the locker room was loud and loose. Cole was laughing about something. The third line was doing some handshake they'd apparently invented this week. Even the guys who hadn't gotten much ice time were up, because we'd just beaten the second-ranked team in the conference by 4 goals and that was the kind of thing you felt in your whole body whether you'd scored or not. Marcus was in the middle of it. Talking, laughing, giving someone a shove on the shoulder. I watched him for a moment across the room. He caught my eye. Raised his chin once in acknowledgement. Nothing else. I looked away. Harlow came into the locker room after the press had cleared out, the way he sometimes did after a big win, not to give a speech, just to be in the space with us for a minute. He moved around the room, said something to each cluster of guys, short and specific, the way he communicated. When he got to me he stopped and put his hand on my shoulder and looked at me. Not the coaching look. The other one. "Good game," he said. Just that. "Thank you, coach." He held my shoulder for a second and the way he looked at me, I'd seen that look maybe 3 or 4 times in 5 years, and each time it hit the same place in my chest that nothing else could reach. The place that had been empty for most of my life before I walked into this program. "Get some rest," he said. He moved on. I sat at my stall and unlaced my skates and felt, for the first time in 3 weeks, like everything might actually be okay. The scouts. The game. Tessa and the plan we'd built together. Even Marcus standing down. All of it aligned into something that felt, for this one night, like the right shape. Everything balanced. Everything suspended. I should have known better. I knew better. I was in the shower when my phone lit up on the bench. I didn't see it until I got back to my stall, the room half cleared by then, a few guys still dressing, the noise settling from its post-game peak. I picked up my phone and saw the notification. Not a text to me. A text from Cole. "We need to talk tonight." Not about the game. I stared at it. Cole was across the room, already in his street clothes, his back to me, head bent over his own phone. He had the particular posture of someone receiving information they hadn't wanted. My phone buzzed again. "Can you come to my place? Just you. Bring Tessa." The good feeling from the game, that clean, aligned, everything is fine feeling, drained out of me in about 4 seconds. I looked across the room at Marcus. He was zipping up his bag. His back was to me. His shoulders were relaxed. Okay, I thought. There it is. I typed back to Cole, on my way. Then I called Tessa. Chapter 13. Offsides. POV, Tessa. My first thought, when I opened the door and saw Cole's face, was that someone had been hurt. He had that quality, jaw set, eyes carrying something heavy, the specific look of a person who'd driven to your building because the thing they needed to say was too large for a phone call. I stepped back without saying anything and he came in and stood in the middle of my small living room like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," he said. He held out his phone. I took it. The photo was from the bookstore cafe on the 12th. I knew the date because I remembered the afternoon, a Wednesday, slow and warm inside while the snow came down hard outside, Remy's shoulder under my cheek while he read something on his phone and I pretended to read my notes and neither of us was in any hurry to be anywhere else. His mouth at my temple. My hand on his arm. Both of us completely, obviously, unmistakably something that wasn't two people who barely knew each other. I looked at it for a long time. Tessa. Cole's voice was careful. Not angry. Scared. If your dad sees this. I know. Does he know? Anything? Any part of it? No. He pushed a hand through his hair. He was pacing now, short, tight lines across my living room, the way people moved when they were trying to burn off something they couldn't sit still with. How long has this been? A year. He stopped walking. Looked at me. A year, he said. Yes. And you've just, he made a gesture that covered the whole situation. This whole season. All of it. Yes. And Marcus has apparently been building to this for longer than we knew. I set his phone on the coffee table face down. I didn't want to look at it anymore. He came to Remy last week. Wanted Remy to push my dad for the alternate captain spot. Remy said no. So he went to me instead. Cole said it quietly. Like he was arriving at something he didn't want to be true. He sent this to me because he knew, he stopped. He knew I knew about Remy. He knew if I saw this I'd come straight to you. Or to my father. I'd never go to your father. He said it fast and certain. I wouldn't do that. I know you wouldn't. He sat down on the couch. Put his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands and stayed like that for a moment. Cole was a person who felt things openly, it was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him even from a distance. He didn't perform composure when something hit him. He just sat with it. You have to tell him, he said. Into his hands. Then he lifted his head and looked at me straight. Tessa. Your dad. It has to come from you. Tonight or tomorrow, first thing, it has to be you before Marcus decides to be you. I know. Because if Marcus sends this to someone else, if it gets to the program, to the athletic department. I know, Cole. I'm not trying to, he stopped. Exhaled. I'm not trying to make this harder. I'm scared for you. For both of you. The way this looks if it comes out wrong. Remy's career, I said. Yes. His scholarship. Yes. We looked at each other. The thing between us in that moment wasn't accusation or judgment. It was the specific weight of two people who cared about the same person looking at the same wall and knowing one of them was going to have to put their hands on it. We had a plan, I said. We were going to tell him. Remy and I, together, after we'd figured out the right way. The plan's gone. I know. You have maybe, he looked at his phone on the table. If Marcus sent this to me tonight, he might sit on it. Might not. I don't know how fast he moves or what else he's holding. He looked up at me. If there are other photos. We don't know that. Tessa. What if there are? I didn't have an answer for that. The possibility had been sitting in the back of my mind since the first note, that the bookstore wasn't the only moment, that someone patient enough to watch for 3 months was patient enough to document more than once. I hadn't said it out loud because saying it out loud made it more real, and there were limits to how much real I could absorb at one time. Go, Cole said. Standing up. Moving toward the door. Call Remy. Get ahead of this right now. I will. He stopped at the door and turned back. His face had settled from scared into something steadier, the alternate captain thing, the quality that made him good at the role in a way that had nothing to do with scoring percentages. For what it's worth, he said. I've watched him this season. The way he plays, the way he carries the team, that's not a guy who's distracted by something that doesn't matter. Whatever this is between you two, he paused, picked his words. It matters. Anyone paying attention can see it. Even when you're both working this hard to hide it. I held the door handle. Thank you, I said. He left. I stood in the middle of my living room for 3 seconds. Then I picked up my phone. Remy picked up before the first ring finished. Tell me, he said. Marcus sent the photo to Cole. Silence. 2 seconds, 3. How bad? Bad. Clear. There's no reading it any other way. I sat down on the couch where Cole had just been sitting. He's not going to sit on this, Remy. We called his bluff and this is his next move. If we don't get ahead of it tonight, we're going to get ahead of it. The plan we made. We make a new one. His voice was steady. Not managing me this time. Just steady. Together. Tonight. I pressed my free hand flat against my knee to stop it from moving. Cole said we have maybe 24 hours. Maybe less. Then we use them. A pause. I'm already in my car. I looked at the closed front door. Okay, I said. Tessa. Yeah. We're okay, he said. Whatever happens with your dad, with Marcus, with all of it, we're okay. You know that, right? I sat with that for a second. The photo on Cole's phone. The note on my kitchen table 3 weeks ago. The year of rules and careful distances and practiced neutrality and all the small performances that added up to a secret that had started feeling less like protection and more like a cage. I know, I said. Good. I heard his turn signal through the phone. Leave the door unlocked. Chapter 14. Delayed penalty. POV, Remy. Act 2B, Spiral. They decide to tell Coach Harlow together. Tomorrow. After practice. They stay up most of the night planning what to say, going over it, revising, trying to anticipate his reaction. It feels like a game plan. It feels like they have some control. In the morning, before they can do anything, Harlow calls a team meeting. He's heard something. Not everything, not specifics, but enough. There's a rumor moving through the program about a player and someone connected to staff. He's furious, not at anyone specific, at the concept of it. At the violation of professional boundaries. At the idea that someone on his team would go behind his back. He's standing at the whiteboard talking about trust and integrity and Remy is sitting third row and Tessa is in the bleachers with her clipboard and neither of them looks at the other. The plan dies in that room. The narrative must be told in first-person singular using I as the voice throughout. Keep the tone blunt, emotionally gripping, and realistic with no fancy grammar or complicated words. Use simple English vocabulary and straightforward sentence structures. Create a strong hook that instantly captures a first-time reader's attention. Include a powerful moment of conflict or suspense that sets the tone for the rest of the book. Prioritize dialogue over narration and use show-don't-tell techniques throughout. Write in paragraph format with left-aligned text and 1.15 line spacing. Make every character show emotion in a raw and believable way. Ensure each scene connects logically to the story world and character dynamics that will unfold in later chapters. Avoid repeating words and steer clear of overused phrases such as delve, elevate, embark, enhance, landscape, tapestry, comprehensive, dive, furthermore, interplay, journey, pivotal, resonate, showcasing, testament, vast, in summary, in conclusion, or any AI-sounding expressions. Focus on creating authentic human voices through dialogue and genuine emotional reactions. Build tension naturally through character interactions and conflicts rather than explanatory narration. End with forward momentum that makes readers need to continue to the next chapter. Chapter 15. Blind Side. POV, Tessa. I knew the look. That was the thing that broke me open during the meeting, not the words, not the room going still, not the 24 hours he'd given like a countdown clock. It was my father's face when he said the thing I love most is threatened. He didn't say those words exactly. He didn't have to. I'd been reading that face my whole life. It was the same look he'd had the year I was 12 and someone filed a complaint against him with the athletic department, something small, quickly resolved, completely unfair, and he'd sat at the kitchen table with papers spread in front of him and that particular quality of a man who would rather absorb damage than let anything he'd built take it. I'd watched him from the hallway because he hadn't seen me come down for water. He'd looked like someone had their hands around something he couldn't protect and he was trying to figure out the geometry of putting his body in between. He looked like that at the whiteboard this morning. I sat in the bleachers after everyone else had cleared out and the room was empty and wrote nothing on my clipboard and thought about the plan on the yellow notepad and how completely, absolutely, irreversibly it no longer existed. Outside, Remy was waiting. I'd told him okay. I owed him that conversation. I found him around the side of the building, away from the main doors, hands in his jacket pockets and his breath making small clouds in the January cold. He looked at me when I came around the corner and I could see him reading my face the same way I'd been reading my father's, looking for where I was, what I was carrying, whether I was okay. I wasn't okay. I didn't say that. We still have time, he said. Do we? Your dad said 24 hours. He said 24 hours to anyone who knows something. He wasn't talking to us specifically. He doesn't know yet, not for certain. I stopped in front of him. But he's close. Someone said something to someone. The room is leaking. Then we go in today. Right now, before practice, before. Remy. My voice came out quiet. Not angry. Just tired in a way that had nothing to do with the 4 hours of sleep. Look at his face this morning. Did you look at his face? He didn't answer. He had looked. I knew he had. He's not ready to hear it, I said. And I'm not, I need a day. One day to think. To figure out how I walk into that office and say this in a way that he can actually receive it. He held my gaze for a long moment. One day, he said. One day. I'll go to him tomorrow. We'll go. We'll go, I said. He reached for my hand. I let him hold it for 1 second in the cold outside the arena, 1 second of his hand around mine, warm against the cold air, and then I stepped back because we were 20 feet from a building full of people and I was still doing that. Still performing the absence of us even when everything was about to crack open anyway. I'll call you tonight, I said. I didn't call him that night. I sat at my desk at 9 p.m. with my phone face down and tried to figure out when exactly I had turned into the thing I hated most, the person who went quiet and disappeared when things got hard. I was doing it. I could see myself doing it clearly. And I was doing it for the reason I always did things like this, because I'd seen my father's face and I recognized the look and something in me, some old trained response, had said step back, make yourself smaller, don't be the thing that costs someone something they love. It wasn't about Remy. That was what I had to keep telling myself. It wasn't that I loved him less or wanted this less. It was that I'd watched that man stand at a whiteboard and show everyone exactly how much this program meant to him, and I was the person who was about to walk into his office and tell him that someone inside it had been lying to his face for a year. I picked up my phone and called the Boston internship coordinator. She picked up on the third ring. Professional, warm, efficient. I said I was calling to confirm the start date and whether there was any flexibility given some personal circumstances. There wasn't. January 15th was fixed. The lab had funding cycles, project timelines, a whole structure built around that date. She was sorry. She looked forward to seeing me in 2 weeks. I thanked her and hung up. I sat with the closed door of the possibility I'd half opened without letting myself fully name it, the one where Boston wasn't just an internship but also a way out of this moment, a way to let it resolve without me standing in the middle of it. I sat with it and looked at it honestly and felt ashamed of myself and then put it away. I was going to my father's office. Tomorrow. No Boston, no backing out, no more days. I just needed to get through tonight first. My phone lit up. Remy. I stared at his name for 3 full seconds and then set the phone face down again. 10 minutes later, a text, you don't have to talk. Just let me know you're okay. I picked the phone up. I'm okay, I typed. I just need tonight. Okay, he sent back. Then, after a pause, I'm not going anywhere. I set the phone down and put my face in my hands and stayed like that for a while. Juno showed up at 11 without being invited. This was a thing she did, arrived when she had decided her presence was required, with the complete confidence of someone who had never once in her life shown up somewhere and been wrong about being needed. She had her own tea in a travel mug and she came in and sat at my kitchen table and looked at me standing in the middle of my living room like I'd forgotten what rooms were for. Sit down, she said. I sat. Talk. I don't know where to start. Yes, you do. I looked at my hands. I've been avoiding him. I know. Not because I want to. Because I looked at my dad's face this morning and I stopped. I keep thinking about what it's going to do to Remy if my dad reacts badly. What it does to his scholarship, his draft position, the relationship they have. And I keep thinking that if I just disappear, Juno said. I looked up. That's the word, she said. Not cruel. Just precise. You're thinking if you disappear from the situation it becomes smaller. Like you're the variable and if you remove yourself you remove the problem. That's not. It is. And it won't work. It's also not fair to him. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Tessa. You're not protecting him by disappearing. You're just disappearing. And he's sitting in his room right now feeling you pull back and not knowing if it's about the situation or about him, and that uncertainty is worse than whatever you're trying to spare him from. I sat with that. I'm scared, I said. I know. I'm scared that I walk into my dad's office and I say the thing and it doesn't just cost Remy, it costs them. What they have. That relationship that Remy has never had with anyone else in his life. I heard my voice do something I hadn't planned. I don't want to be the reason that breaks. Juno was quiet for a moment. You're not the reason, she said. The year of hiding is a reason. Marcus is a reason. The fact that your dad built a program that made this complicated is a reason. You falling in love with someone is not a reason. She paused. And Remy walked into this with his eyes open. He made the same choices you made. He doesn't need you to absorb the consequences on his behalf. I looked at the table. Go to your dad tomorrow, she said. Not for the plan. Not for the 24-hour clock. Because you've been carrying this for a year and you're done carrying it, and the only way to put it down is to say it out loud to the person who needs to hear it. My phone lit up on the table between us. Not Remy this time. An unknown number. No name. One line. How's the plan going? I stared at it. Juno leaned over and read it. Her jaw tightened. Marcus, I said. He's not sending this to you, Juno said. He doesn't have your number. Then he sent it to. My phone buzzed again. Remy. Just got a text. Unknown number. How's the plan going? Tell me you got the same one. I picked up the phone and called him. He answered before it rang. He's watching us, I said. He wants us to know he's still there. I know. He's not done, Remy. I know that too. A pause, short and loaded. You need to go to your dad tomorrow. I know. Not because of the clock. Because. I know, I said. I know. I already decided. I looked at Juno across the table. Tomorrow morning. Before practice. I'm going to his office. The line was quiet for a moment. I'll come, Remy said. Not yet. Let me go first. Alone. I said it before he could argue. This has to be a daughter conversation before it becomes anything else. Please. A long pause. I could feel him working through it, the instinct to be there, to be the one in front of whatever was coming, pressing against the thing I was asking him to trust. Okay, he said finally. Tell me after. Right after. Right after, I said. I promise. Chapter 16. Roughing. POV, Remy. Plot twist, Remy confronts Marcus properly, finally, in front of Cole, and Marcus reveals that he's had the photo for 2 months. He found out long before the note under the wiper blade. He's been sitting on it, watching, waiting. Why? Remy says. Because I wanted to see what you'd do. Whether you'd choose her or the team. And. You'd choose her, Marcus says, and it doesn't sound like an accusation. It sounds like he's grieving something. You'd burn it all down for her. I didn't think anyone actually did that. Something shifts in the scene. Marcus isn't entirely a villain. He's someone who's never been chosen, watching someone who doesn't realize how chosen he is. It complicates everything. Cole, who has heard all of this, looks at Remy and says, tell him yourself. Before it gets worse. Hashtag. Chapter 17. Empty net. POV, Tessa. All is lost. Tessa goes to her father's office. Not to confess, just to talk, to feel out the territory, to see if there's any version of this that doesn't end in catastrophe. She goes as his daughter. She sits across from him at his desk. He looks tired. He looks older. He says, I feel like there's something you're not telling me. And Tessa, who has had it all planned, who has scripts and strategies and Juno's backup plan, says. Dad, I'm in love with someone. The room goes so quiet she can hear the heating vent. Someone at this school. He asks carefully. Yes. On the team. Beat. Dad. Is it Callahan? The silence answers for her. Coach Harlow stands up. Walks to the window. Stands there for a long time. How long? He finally says. A year. The way his shoulders drop, not in anger, but in something worse, is the most devastating moment in the book. Get out of my office, Tessa. I need to think. The narrative must be told in first-person singular using I as the voice throughout. Keep the tone blunt, emotionally gripping, and realistic with no fancy grammar or complicated words. Use simple English vocabulary and straightforward sentence structures. Create a strong hook that instantly captures a first-time reader's attention. Include a powerful moment of conflict or suspense that sets the tone for the rest of the book. Prioritize dialogue over narration and use show-don't-tell techniques throughout. Write in paragraph format with left-aligned text and 1.15 line spacing. Make every character show emotion in a raw and believable way. Ensure each scene connects logically to the story world and character dynamics that will unfold in later chapters. Avoid repeating words and steer clear of overused phrases such as delve, elevate, embark, enhance, landscape, tapestry, comprehensive, dive, furthermore, interplay, journey, pivotal, resonate, showcasing, testament, vast, in summary, in conclusion, or any AI-sounding expressions. Focus on creating authentic human voices through dialogue and genuine emotional reactions. Build tension naturally through character interactions and conflicts rather than explanatory narration. End with forward momentum that makes readers need to continue to the next chapter. Chapter 18. Sudden Death. POV, Remy. Harlow pulls Remy before practice the next morning. Sends everyone else out. Closes the door. The conversation is quiet. That's the worst part. No shouting. Just Harlow sitting across from Remy with his hands folded and his face carved of stone. Did you think I wouldn't find out? We were going to tell you. When? When we had a plan that wouldn't. A plan that wouldn't what, Callahan? Wouldn't make me look like a fool. Wouldn't jeopardize your standing on this team. Remy takes the hit. Doesn't argue. You are on my team, Harlow says. You eat at my table. You are, he stops. Breathes. Asterisk, this program took you in. I took you in. Asterisk. Asterisk, I know. Asterisk. Asterisk, do you? Asterisk. Long silence. I'm not going to ask you to end it, Harlow says finally, the words seeming to cost him enormously. Asterisk, but I need to know that what happens on that ice is separate. Completely. Can you give me that? Asterisk. Asterisk, yes. Asterisk. If it ever compromises this team. Asterisk, it won't. Asterisk. Harlow nods once. Dismisses him. It should feel like relief. It doesn't. Hashtag. Chapter 19. Face Off. POV, Tessa. Act 3, Climax. Harlow calls Tessa back. The second conversation is harder than the first. He's had time to metabolize it and now there are real questions. Why the secrecy? Why a year? What does she actually want from this? Does she understand the position she's put Remy in? Tessa doesn't back down. For the first time, she doesn't make herself small. Asterisk, I know you've spent 20 years putting this team first. I know that's who you are. But Dad, I spent 20 years watching you do that, and I learned how to disappear. I don't want to do that anymore. He sees me. He actually sees me. I'm not apologizing for that. Asterisk. Harlow listens to all of it. He doesn't say she's wrong. Then, asterisk, the internship. Boston. Are you taking it? Asterisk. She forgot he would know about that. Of course he knows. He knows everything about her life, secondhand, the way people who are always slightly absent do. I don't know yet, she says. Asterisk, don't make decisions about your future for a boy, Tessa. Asterisk. Asterisk, I won't. But don't ask me to make them against one either. Asterisk. Hashtag. Chapter 23. Final buzzer. POV, Tessa. Cole's apartment had 30 people in it, which was about 25 more than it was designed for. Bodies everywhere, on the couch, on the kitchen counter, on the floor in the living room with beers and phones and the particular warm noise of a group of people who had been through something hard together and come out the other side of it still intact. The game was already replaying on the TV in the corner on mute, everyone talking too loud to need the audio. Someone had a speaker going. The whole room smelled like takeout and celebration and the specific kind of relief that had been weeks in the building. I was on the couch. That was the thing. Not standing in a corner holding my own space, not keeping a careful distance, not running my observer's eye across the room and staying outside it. I was on the couch with my feet tucked under me and Remy's shoulder under my cheek and his arm around me and I was just there. Present. Taking up exactly the space I was in without accounting for how it looked. It felt strange in the best possible way. Like wearing a coat that had been yours all along and finally putting it on outside instead of only in private. Nobody made a thing of it. That was what surprised me most. Cole had said bring her when he texted Remy about the party and Remy had said already planning on it and that had been the whole conversation. The team had seen us on the ice after the final buzzer and whatever that moment had settled, it had settled quietly and without drama. A few guys had given Remy that particular nod, the teammate nod, the one that communicated something too layered to be a word. That was it. Nobody made a thing of it and it turned out that nobody making a thing of it was the thing I'd been most afraid of not having. Juno was on the armchair across from us with her own drink and the comfortable expression of someone watching a situation they'd invested a lot of time worrying about finally come out right. She had her phone out. I saw her point it in our direction at some point, a casual, unhurried angle, and I knew she was taking a photo the same way I knew she wouldn't post it. She was taking it for us. For the future version of tonight that needed a record. I didn't look up or pose or acknowledge it. I just stayed exactly where I was with my cheek on Remy's shoulder and his thumb moving once across the back of my hand and the room loud and warm around us. I looked across the room. Marcus Webb was in the kitchen doorway with a beer, leaning against the frame with his feet crossed at the ankle, watching something on his phone. He wasn't part of the main group and he knew it. He'd positioned himself at the edge of the room the way a person did when they understood they were present but not quite inside the thing being celebrated. He'd come anyway. I didn't know what that said about him. Maybe that he wasn't done trying to figure out which version of himself he wanted to be. As I watched, he looked up. Not at me, at Remy. Remy had seen it too. I felt him shift very slightly. Marcus raised his bottle. Not a toast, not a signal, just an acknowledgement. Here we are. Both of us still in the room. Remy dipped his chin. Once. The same. Not forgiveness. I knew that. Remy knew that. This wasn't the end of something complicated, it was just a door being left open rather than locked, and that was enough for tonight. Marcus went back to his phone. Mine buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen. My father's name. I sat up carefully, trying not to jostle Remy. He felt it and looked at the phone over my shoulder and said nothing, just nodded, a small one. I went out the front door. The cold hit clean and sharp after the warmth of the apartment. The building's front step was empty except for two guys having a conversation at the far end of the walkway, low-voiced, not paying attention to me. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hey, Dad. Hey. His voice had the quality it got when he'd been in his office late, a little quieter, a little slower. The coaching armor off, just the person underneath it. How's the party? Loud. Good. I sat on the step despite the cold. Cole's apartment is not big enough for this many people. Never is. A pause. I heard the chair, the squeaky one. You okay? Yeah. I meant it completely. I'm really good actually. Good game tonight. You coached a good game. Callahan set up that goal in the third. He said it straight. No hesitation, no performance of objectivity. Just the plain truth of a coach who saw what happened on the ice. 2 steps ahead of everyone else on the ice. He does that, he sees the play before it exists. I know, I said. Another pause. Longer. The kind where something was being decided about whether to say the thing or let it sit. Are you happy? He said. The question landed quietly. No lead-up, no context, just the question, plain and direct in a way that was so unlike his usual architecture of careful conversation that I sat with it for a second before I answered. Yeah, I said. I really am. He was quiet on his end. Through Cole's front door I could hear the muffled surge of voices, someone laughing at full volume, the bass of the music. The cold was working its way through my jacket but I didn't move. I've been thinking, my father said. Slow. Working towards something. About what you said in my office. About learning to disappear. I waited. I didn't know you'd learned that here, he said. From watching me. Another pause. I should have known. I should have been paying closer attention. Dad. I'm not looking for you to let me off the hook. I'm just, he stopped. When he started again his voice was a degree quieter. I'm glad you stopped. Disappearing. I'm glad something made you stop. Something tightened in my throat. He helped, I said. I know he did. No resistance in it. No qualification. Just the plain acknowledgement of a man who'd been sitting with something for 2 weeks and arrived somewhere honest. Good, he said again. That's good, Tess. The nickname. The one he'd used until I was about 11 and then somewhere along the way replaced with the full version, the formal one, the one that had always felt slightly like he was talking to one of his players. Tessa. Precise and clear and slightly at arm's length. Tess. I pressed my lips together for a second. Are you going to be okay? I said. With all of it. With how things are now. Ask me in a month. He said it without irony. Honest. I'm getting there. That's enough, I said. That's more than enough. Go back inside, he said. It's cold. How do you know it's cold? It's January in upstate New York. It's always cold. I laughed. Small and real. Go back inside, Tessa. Back to the full name. But the warmth was still underneath it, still present in the way it had always been present when you knew where to listen. Have a good night. You too, Dad. I sat on the cold step for another minute after we hung up. Not because I needed to, just because I wanted one moment between the phone call and the party, one moment of standing inside the space between what this night had been a year ago and what it was now. A year ago I was in Section C watching a game I wasn't allowed to react to, clipboard in my lap, face neutral, keeping my presence in that building so small and clean that it wouldn't cost anyone anything. Tonight my father had called to ask if I was happy. I went back inside. The party was smaller by midnight. People had filtered out in groups, the way parties went, the earliest ones first, then a slow drift, until it was down to the core of it, the people who didn't want the night to end yet. Cole was on the kitchen floor for some reason, back against the cabinet, in a conversation with two of the defensemen that sounded like it had gotten philosophical. The speaker was playing something slower than it had been an hour ago. I found Remy where I'd left him. He'd shifted on the couch while I was outside, leaning back now, head against the cushion, the particular posture of someone who'd given everything he had tonight and was now letting the tank refill. He opened his eyes when I sat back down beside him. "Your dad," he said. "Yeah. How was it?" "Good." I put my head back on his shoulder. "Really good." His arm came back around me. We sat like that and listened to the room settle around us, and I thought about my mother saying "I want that for you, a real life, a good one," and looked at the ceiling of Cole Drayton's apartment and thought that this was what it looked like. Not perfect. Not uncomplicated. Just real, and warm, and entirely, completely mine. Juno was in the armchair with her eyes closed, not asleep, just done talking for the night. I caught her eye when she opened them briefly. She held up her phone. The photo she'd taken earlier was on the screen, small and clear, me with my head on Remy's shoulder, his arm around me, the room chaotic around us and neither of us looking at it. I looked at it for a second. She tilted her phone toward me. "A question." I reached over and she handed it across. I looked at the photo for a long moment, really looked, the way you looked at something you wanted to keep, and then I sent it to myself and handed the phone back. She smiled. Just once. Then closed her eyes again. Remy hadn't seen the exchange. He had his head back and his eyes forward and his thumb was doing the slow absent thing across my shoulder where his arm rested, the automatic gesture of someone who didn't know they were doing it because it had already become that natural. "Boston in 9 days, I said. "I know. You're still going to help me pack." I said I would. "You're going to complain the entire time." "I'm going to be extremely supportive." "You're going to stack all my books by height instead of subject and act like that's helpful." "That is objectively more helpful." I laughed. "It's genuinely not." "I respectfully disagree." I lifted my head off his shoulder so I could look at him. He was smiling, the contained version, the one that mostly lived in the corner of his mouth and his eyes, the one that I'd spent a year pretending not to notice from a row of bleachers. "Hi," I said. "Hi," he said back. Like we were the only two people in the room. Like we always had been, even when we were working very hard to pretend otherwise. I put my head back down. The room moved around us, Cole's voice in the kitchen finding some new argument, the speaker shifting into something even quieter, the sound of the city outside the windows doing its own late-night thing. Juno dozed in the armchair. The TV replayed the winning goal on mute for the 3rd time. I didn't look at it. I had the photo on my phone now, small and real and ours. I had Boston in 9 days and 4 hours on a map that wasn't a wall. I had my father's voice saying Tess like I was still the person he'd known before the team became the whole world. And I had this, exactly this, Remy's shoulder in the warm room and the end of the night coming slowly and neither of us in any hurry to meet it. For the first time in a year, we weren't pretending anything. That was the whole thing. That was everything. Chapter 21. Hat Trick. POV, Tessa. Plot twist number 2, Tessa discovers something she didn't know about her own parents, that her father had a similar situation early in his coaching career. A relationship he kept secret. One that ended badly, partly because of the secrecy, partly because he chose the team. Her mother tells her over the phone, calmly, like it's just history now. He's not angry at Remy because he thinks Remy did something wrong, Diane says. He's angry because he recognizes it. And he knows exactly how it ends if you keep hiding. Asterisk, how did it end for you two? Asterisk, we got married. And then we got divorced. And somewhere in the middle we had you. Asterisk. Tessa accepts the internship. Not to escape, to choose herself, for the first time, the way she told her father she wanted to. She calls Remy. She tells him. The conversation is terrifying. He's quiet for a long time. Boston's not that far, he finally says. Asterisk, 4 hours. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've skated harder than 4 hours. Asterisk. She laughs. He doesn't. He means it completely. ##. Chapter 22. Power Forward. POV, Remy. Championship Game. Conference Finals. The Wolves versus the Eastbrook Falcons. The scene is all kinetic energy, the pregame rituals, the locker room, Coach Harlow moving through the space like the engine of a machine he spent his life building. Tessa is in the stands. She's allowed to be there now, actually there, actually watching, not pretending not to care. For the first time in a year, Remy skates out and doesn't have to pretend to not look for her. He finds her immediately, up in Section C, Juno beside her, scarf pulled up against the cold of the arena. She sees him see her. She doesn't look away. He plays the best game of his career. 3 points. A game-winning assist with 44 seconds left. The kind of game that earns a draft call. In the chaos after, the ice rush, the celebration, helmets thrown, Coach Harlow pushes through the crowd toward Remy. Tessa is 20 feet away and doesn't move. Harlow reaches Remy. Grips his shoulder. Looks at him. Asterisk, good game, Callahan. Asterisk. Then he looks past him, at Tessa. Something in his face gives. He nods at her, small, private, costly, and goes to talk to the assistant coaches. It is the closest thing to a blessing he knows how to give. ##. Chapter 24. Season's End. POV, Remy. 3 weeks later. January. Tessa is leaving for Boston in the morning. Her apartment is mostly packed. They eat takeout on the floor because the table's in boxes. He helps her wrap her books. They don't talk much, not because there's nothing to say, but because some things exist better in the silences. At some point she says, asterisk, are you scared? Asterisk. Every day, he says. Asterisk, but not of this. Asterisk. Asterisk, what are you scared of? Asterisk. He thinks about it. Honestly. Asterisk, that I'll get drafted and it'll change me. That I'll wake up one day and not recognize myself. Asterisk. She looks at him for a long time. Then you come find me, she says. Asterisk, I'll recognize you. Asterisk. He leaves at 2 a.m. At the door he kisses her once, then again, then stands in the cold with his forehead against hers. Boston's 4 hours, he says. Asterisk, I know. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'll drive it every weekend. Asterisk. Asterisk, you won't. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'll drive it every other weekend. Asterisk. Asterisk, probably. Asterisk. Asterisk, definitely. Asterisk. She laughs. He watches her laugh and files the image away somewhere permanent. I'll drive it every other weekend, he thinks. Asterisk, and on the ones I don't, she'll drive it here. And one day there won't be any more distance to drive. I know that like I know where the puck is going before it gets there. Some things you just read, asterisk. ##, open book. Epilogue. 1 year later. POV, Tessa. My father introduced me to someone in the lobby. That was the moment. Not the one I'd planned on, not the big defined moment I'd spent a year anticipating, the scene where everything was resolved and the right words were said and both of us knew exactly where we stood. Just a lobby in a convention center in June, my father seeing a colleague from another program and stopping to say hello, and his hand coming to my shoulder briefly, and him saying, "This is my daughter Tessa." Not the coach's daughter. Not a nod in my direction and a return to the real conversation. Not the footnote. My daughter Tessa. His colleague shook my hand and said something polite about the program, and my father answered and the conversation moved on, and his hand left my shoulder and that was all of it. 30 seconds in a lobby. I'd been carrying the weight of wanting that for so long I hadn't realized until it happened how small the actual moment would be. How quiet. How completely ordinary in the best possible sense. I found Juno in the stands 20 minutes later. She looked at my face when I sat down. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah. I meant it all the way through. Really good." The arena was loud in the way only a draft arena was loud, not the contained roar of a game, but something more diffuse, more sustained. Thousands of people in a building all vibrating at slightly different frequencies, waiting for the same thing from different directions. Names on a board. Years of work becoming official in the time it took to read 9 letters. I was in my seat in Section B with Juno on my left and Cole on my right, and Scout Callahan 1 seat past Cole, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees the way Remy leaned forward when he was concentrating, the family resemblance easy and obvious once you knew where to look. She was 19 and had driven from Minnesota alone and arrived at the hotel at midnight and knocked on my door because Remy had given her my number and told her I'd be up. I had been up. I'd let her in and we'd sat on my hotel bed and she'd told me about her job and her roommate and the hockey she still played recreationally on a city league, and I'd told her about the lab and the research in Boston, and somewhere around 2 a.m. she'd said he talks about you all the time, just so you know, and I'd said he doesn't and she'd said he really does. I loved her immediately. I'd told Remy that this morning and he'd said I know in that particular way he had. "Round 2 coming up," Cole said beside me. He had both his knees bouncing, he'd been doing it since the first round started. Cole's version of nervous was kinetic. "This is it. Round 2. You've said that 3 times, Juno said, across me. Because it keeps being true." He turned to me. "Are you nervous?" "I'm fine." "You've been fine for 2 hours. That's not normal fine." "It's my normal fine." He looked at me. "Your hands are completely still." "I know. He pointed. "That's not human." "I spent a year keeping my face neutral in a hockey arena," I said. "This is nothing." Scout snorted on his other side. He looked at her. She shrugged. The announcer's voice cut across the noise level and every conversation in a 20-row radius dimmed by 2 degrees. I sat forward. The second round moved faster than the first, the pace was different, more compressed, the picks coming in clusters with shorter gaps between. Cole had stopped talking. Scout had her hands locked together in her lap, knuckles pale. Juno was looking at her phone and then the board and then her phone. I watched the board. The first 15 picks of round 2 went by and I stayed exactly where I was. Still. Waiting. The same way I'd waited in bleachers for a year, present, focused, keeping everything internal while the room did whatever the room did. And then the announcer said his name. Remy Callahan. Harlow University. Selected in the second round. I was on my feet before I'd processed it. Not a choice, just my body doing the thing it had been doing for 18 months every time something good happened to him. Moving toward it. The arena went up all around me and Scout was on her feet with her hands over her mouth and Cole was making a sound that wasn't quite a word, and Juno grabbed my arm briefly, not to stop me, just to be touching me for the moment, and I stood in Section B row 7 and watched Remy's face appear on the screen above the stage. His face when he heard his name. I'd thought about it, tried to picture it, the expression he'd make, and I'd gotten it completely wrong. I'd imagined some version of the contain not showing it look, the jaw set, the eyes forward. What was actually on the big screen was something I'd only ever seen in private, in the small hours of the morning in his truck or my kitchen or the dark of his dorm, the look where something enormous was happening inside him and he was so surprised by it that the usual discipline hadn't arrived in time. Raw. Real. Completely, entirely him. I put my hand over my chest without realizing I'd done it. He found me in 40 minutes. The floor after the second round was a specific kind of organized chaos, people moving in every direction, credential lanyards, and team reps and family groups navigating the current. I'd come down from the stands with Juno and Cole and Scout and we'd made it to the edge of the main floor and I'd stopped there and said I'll find you and Cole had given me a look and said obviously and they'd peeled off to give us the space. I stood at the edge of the floor and waited. He came through the crowd like he always moved, not forcing it, not fighting the current, just finding the line that already existed through people the way he found lines on the ice. And he was scanning as he came, that particular way his head moved when he was reading the space, taking everything in at once, and then he found me and stopped scanning. He reached me. There were people everywhere. Cameras at the periphery. His new team's PR people 3 rows back. My father somewhere in this building, probably on his phone, probably talking to someone about next season's recruiting class. None of it changed anything. Second round, I said. Second round. His voice had that quality, the one where enormous things were running underneath calm words. That's still the NHL. Yeah. He was looking at me the way he'd been looking at me since the bookstore on the 12th and the arena at 11 at night and every Tuesday evening in a small apartment with boxes of books and cold takeout on the floor. Like I was the still point in the room. Like I always had been. Yeah, it is. I reached up and put my hands on his face. In front of everyone. The cameras and the crowd and the PR people and the team reps and wherever my father was standing at a specific distance on this floor. I put my hands on his face and looked at him and didn't manage anything about it. I'm proud of you, I said. His eyes did the thing. The barely there softening that started at the outer corners and moved inward, the thing that most people who watched him on the ice for 5 years would have completely missed because they weren't looking for it. I had been looking for it since a dark arena at 11 at night. I know, he said. That's the whole point. He kissed me. Right there, in the middle of the draft floor, in front of everyone, in front of the cameras that would have this in tomorrow's coverage and the team reps who would mention it in whatever profile piece came next and the whole loud ordinary machinery of the life he was stepping into. He kissed me and I kissed him back and the arena noise went up around us and swallowed the moment whole. When we pulled back his hands were still in my hair and mine were still on his face and the crowd was doing its own thing around us and neither of us moved yet. Boston's over, I said. I know. The internship ended last week. I know. So I'm back. I'm home. I looked at him. What happens now? He thought about it for exactly 1 second. Whatever we want, he said. 20 feet behind them, Coach Dale Harlow stood with his phone in his hand and a retired assistant coach from another program beside him, talking about something that had nothing to do with what was happening on the floor. He was nodding at whatever was being said and his eyes were on the middle distance and he was doing the thing he'd gotten better at over the past year, being in 2 places at once. Here, in the professional conversation. And there, where his daughter had her hands on his best player's face in the middle of the NHL draft floor. He watched his daughter. The way she stood, not making herself small, not scanning for exits, not performing the background. Full size. Completely herself. Something he'd been watching settle into place across the past 12 months in small quiet increments, and here it was in full. He looked back at the colleague beside him and answered the question he'd been asked. Then he allowed himself, privately, in the space between one breath and the next, something he'd been working toward for a year. A smile. Small. Complicated in the way that honest things were complicated. Carrying everything it needed to carry and no more. Some things you can't coach, he thought. Some things you just let happen. Hockey stick and puck, the end. Hockey stick and puck. Thank you for reading Cross Ice Pass. For Remy, who learned the game. For Tessa, who learned to stay visible. For everyone who ever loved something they weren't supposed to, and chose it anyway. What are the profitable genres? Amazon. Search intent 14 back-end ranking keyword. For the above book which customers will type when they're searching on Amazon, no repetition in order to abide by Amazon guidelines. February 26th. Author's note. Dear reader, thank you for spending your time with this story. When I first imagined these characters, I wanted to write about people who understand pressure, the kind that comes from the outside, from family, from expectations, and what happens when the walls they've built start cracking open. This story is about the courage it takes to be seen. Not the curated version. The real one. The messy, imperfect, terrified one. I hope that resonated with you. If this book made you feel something, I'd be grateful if you left a review. Reviews help readers find stories like this, and every one means the world to me. With gratitude. Cordelia Blackmore. Acknowledgements. Every book begins with a quiet question. I'm grateful to everyone who helped me find the answer. To my readers, you took a chance on this story, and I couldn't be more thankful. Your messages, your reviews, your enthusiasm, they fuel every late-night writing session. To anyone who has ever built something from nothing, a career, a relationship, a second chance, this one's for you. And to the cold coffee that got me through every draft, you were terrible, and I wouldn't change a thing. About the author. Cordelia Blackmore writes emotionally charged contemporary romance that lives in the space between heartbreak and hope. She believes the best love stories start with two people who are certain they want nothing to do with each other. When not writing, she can be found drinking coffee that went cold hours ago and arguing about sports with strangers on the internet. She lives with two cats who judge her word count daily.